the March 4th meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission. And I would like to say, members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card. There are little green cards out in the lobby. There are also agendas out in the lobby. And file it with the secretary. Cards are available in the lobby, right. Speakers will state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience, not the staff. And while Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and obey the orders of the chair. Cheryl, could we have roll call, please?
Chair Quillisi,
Here?
Commissioner Powers,
Here.
Commissioner Corbin,
Here.
Commissioner Lottis. Here. Vice Chair Nolan, absent.
Right, okay, and on that, Kathy, if you're watching out there in television land tonight, I understand you're homesick with the flu. Thank you for not coming to share it with us. Okay, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is public communications, the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. I don't see anyone in the public who appears to want to speak on public communications, so we'll move on to our consent item, the minutes of the regular meeting of Planning Commission, February 19th of this year. Did anyone on the commission have any adds, changes, or corrections?
I'll move for approval.
Second that.
Any discussion? Cheryl, could we have a roll call, please?
Powers,
Yes.
Corbin,
Yes.
Quillisi,
Yes.
Lottis.
Yes.
And I forgot to say, although Sherry Herbruck introduced Cheryl to us before the beginning of the meeting, Cheryl Davis, who is another member of the city staff and has the same title as Sherry Herbruck, will be sitting in on some of our meetings for about 3 sessions and then doing one on her own while Sherry is gone on vacation.
Right, we're going through I guess you could call it a training process.
Right.
To make sure we've got backup when
3
needed.
meetings worth of training and then you're on your own. But welcome. Glad to have you here.
Chair Quillisi,
Yes.
I just would like to, I have a comment that I feel is actually of some significance and import for the meeting tonight and future meetings, and I would like to move that we change the order of the items and allow commission comments under number 5 to be the first item, be item number 2, and make item number 2 number 3.
Okay, is there something going on here?
Yes, I would like to make some comments about the absence policy, and I feel that it merits attention earlier in the evening, not later.
Okay. Any objection to that?
Nope.
If not, so ordered. Then we'll move to item 5, Planning Commission Committee Reports and Comments, and I see I'm up first. Reporting on the Ojai City Council meeting of Tuesday last week. There were 5 major issues that were covered in public communications. There were, a lot of people that spoke on the topic of parking space on North Signal Street at the and at the Platte Trailhead. They said including tour buses that run up to the top of Signal Street, which must be awful They said tour buses, radio-controlled trucks running around, strollers, people parking halfway down the hill on Signal Street, and asked that the city council do something about it. The city council, I think, is in the mood to regulate tour buses, because one person said there was one tour bus that went to the Gridley Road, east end of Shelf Road, and dropped them off, and then just came up briefly to pick up people, which seemed to work better, I guess. Anyway, staff is going to study it, especially with regard to fire department and police department access to that area.
Because they can't turn around.
Because they can't turn around, right. Someone else suggested that they put up a sign that says Shelf Road parking and pointing toward the Pratt Trailhead, which is about between a quarter and a half a mile away along a dirt road. But then somebody else said, well, that's full all the time, so I don't know. The animal keeping ordinance came up, and it was generally well received, but Council Member Wyrick asked 3 questions. One, what's the definition of poisonous? Which we all sort of thought we knew, but it wasn't defined in the ordinance. A question about domestic, because there was a place where it said these rules don't apply to domestic pets or to, service animals, I think. Service animals in particular. He said, well, if they don't apply, does that mean you don't have to treat service animals humanely? So they're gonna try to figure out how to fix that.
If you will recall, we have a specific section that speaks to service
Talks
animals.
about humane treatment of animals, period.
Correct. Well, that as well, but I think the issue with, that the council member was making is, does that then exempt those animals from all the regulations?
From any of the regulations, yeah.
We've got to button some of that up as well.
And he also wanted to know what a definition of bird was,
Yeah,
so,
because there's different types of birds that we're identifying throughout.
right.
He mentioned geese.
Geese, yes.
Oh, yeah, geese, okay, peacocks, I mean, there can be some really annoying birds out there. Councilmember Francina was pushing for a provision for animal rescuers and temporary higher limits on the number of dogs and cats that might be around. Maybe a low-cost permit for a large number of pets. And the issue was continued with Wyrick and Francina to not later than the 2nd April meeting, and they will have an ad hoc committee to study the issue. Third was pickleball. I don't know if anybody here has been out on this side of City Hall when people were playing pickleball. The tennis court that's out there has been taped now for 4 pickleball courts. And it is noisier, but but I've been over there, just standing here by City Hall listening. And so I'm aware that it's a different sound from people playing tennis. But there were 11 speakers, all but one of which were upset with the amount of noise. And people saying, I can't live here anymore, that kind of thing.
I thought there were substitute balls. that could-
Yes, so staff or maybe council members, I'm not sure, they're going to investigate green, that is, low noise, paddles and balls.
And then wasn't there also somebody who spoke about the memorial garden?
Yes, yes.
As being a conflicting kind of
They
use?
said the memorial garden back here down the hill a bit is supposed to be a place for quiet meditation, and you can't quietly meditate if people are playing pickleball. So there was also suggestion to get an acoustics consultant and to investigate this area as well as all other recreational facilities in the city.
I believe that's been done as well.
Yeah.
And I think some acoustic netting is going to be experimented with.
Yeah, so staff is supposed to return with a noise mitigation options and consultant options for council to consider. Item 4 was a review of the Ventura River watershed litigation. The city requested the 6-month extension, so did Ventura City Council, but not Casitas Water District. Not sure why, but I read in the paper that the 6-month extension was granted in a hearing last Thursday, which was after the city council meeting. And one statement was made that new environmental laws have made adjudication obsolete. The only real solution is negotiation, which is what people are working on. Finally, the last item that was discussed during the meeting was the commission attendance policy. The policy passed 4-1 with City Council member Francina voting no. And the policy now is 4 or more absences in a calendar year. The seat is declared, the person is declared an interim commissioner or board member. If it's BAB, it's a board member, until replaced or reappointed for the remainder of the term, and the incumbent can reapply. And the motion I was given by a member of staff, as a matter of council policy, any and all council-appointed commission or board positions whose incumbent has tabulated 4 or more absences in the most recent 12-month reporting period, which they meant to be a calendar year, shall be declared an interim commissioner or board member. At that time, the city clerk shall issue a notice inviting applications, including from the incumbent, to fill the commission or board position for a new permanent term through the remainder of the interim commissioner or board member's term. The existing commission or board member will continue to serve on an interim basis until a new permanent appointment, either the incumbent or someone else, is confirmed by council. So that was the motion that was passed 4-1, and that was, at that point, we were all tired and we went home.
Okay, well, do you mind if I?
Please,
make some
go ahead.
Comments? Yeah, I feel that I'm pretty displeased with the action and the policy, and I do feel that the city council should have discussed this issue directly with the planning commission. They send a liaison, there could have been discussion, the commission could have been polled in terms of talking about what were the absences involving, why, and so forth. And I just feel there were a lot of things, a lot of circumstances that were not recognized or discussed at the council meeting when they were considering this. And I looked at the canceled meetings due to lack of quorum, which is what they were mainly concerned about. And I have to say, the March 6th meeting was canceled because 3 commissioners were attending a League of Cities Planning Commissioner Academy. And we were attending because we were invited by the city to attend. Our attendance was paid for. It was a multi-day work event. It was for the benefit of the commissioners, to benefit both the commission and the community. And if this was a problem, I don't know why this was not discussed, or why were we not informed? It was not perceived as a problem by the commissioners or city staff. It's only perceived as a problem on the part of the council. And that leaves 2 planning commission meetings that were canceled by lack of quorum. Also, I have to say that I believe some absences were due to religious holidays. The new policy absolutely provides no accommodation for any kind of religious holiday absence. There were absences due to illness, and I don't think that that is accounted for in this. I mean, we've just got a very straightforward policy with absolutely no provision for illness, religious holidays, which I think is discriminatory, if not illegal. And I think if the council is concerned about slow-moving projects through the Planning Commission last year, I think they also need to consider that, we had a tumultuous year, sorry if I don't pronounce that, tumultuous year. We've had a lot of staff turnover. We had light agendas. We had projects that did not move quickly through. And, but I feel that all that has changed rather dramatically for the better since the arrival of Joe Fiss, Assistant City Manager, and Lucas Siebert, Community Development Manager. And with this new staff leadership and our wonderful planning staff, I really have seen us working very hard and working exceptionally well together, and the PC workload is moving forward very well. And City Council should not blame past problems with slow-moving projects through Planning Commission on commissioner absences. There were, I think, greater factors than commission absences. I feel that this commission functions very well. We're able to address all the issues brought before it. We work cooperatively together. It's an important, Planning Commission is an important commission, and we are charged with important work. The Planning Commission, another point, the Planning Commission is scheduled to have, we are scheduled to have 24 meetings per year compared to 12 or less scheduled meetings for all other boards and commissions. And we also have additional meeting responsibilities with the MAC, City Council, Joint Council, City Council liaison meetings, Joint Council, Planning Commission meetings, and none of these responsibilities, additional responsibilities that our commission in particular has, were discussed. And we also have subcommittee responsibilities that people have to take additional time to attend. Yet, the council did not even add 1 or 2 additional days to the absence policy for Planning Commission. And I fully blame the Planning Commission. I'm sorry. I fully blame the City Council for not asking the right questions about absences and acting hastily without thinking this through. And I have to say that while I'm not one of the commissioners put on notice, I am sufficiently offended by the implied attitude and disrespect of the council for the time, the effort, the diligence that these commissioners put in, that I am not sure I am willing to continue on this commission if this new policy holds. It's not thought through and very hasty and bullheaded. And I object to this mistreatment by City Council of dedicated, unpaid volunteers with a heavy workload. Fault lies solely with the council in jumping to conclusions not based necessarily on facts and making a series of assumptions that were wrong. Nobody, as I've mentioned, nobody raised issues of illness, religious holidays, conferences for training, meetings that the city asked its commissioners to go to. Autocratic behavior on the part of the council does not engender, encourage, or motivate quality volunteers. And I support the preparation of a joint commission statement to City Council incorporating the comments stated. I also am totally open to, if I've said anything incorrect or that should be, clarified, I'm perfectly open to that. But I feel that this is a policy that is way too rigid and needs to be reexamined.
And I would like
I
to,
welcome other comments.
I also would like to make comment as the most egregiously absent commissioner. I'd like to speak in my behalf and talk about this policy. I'm not in agreement with the policy for all the reasons that Kathy came up with. I also have issue with the idea that if you have absences, that you're not serious about what you're doing. I've had 2 absences last year for religious holidays. I have 2 absences for major family events, and my family happens to be on the East Coast. I have 2 absences for illness, including a broken ankle, and 2 absences for cultural events that I was lucky enough to be invited to that I didn't say no to. I don't wake up in the morning and say, I don't feel like going to Planning Commission. I think I'll just go eat ice cream instead. I don't take this lightly. When I was hired many years ago at the Four Seasons Hotel, the general manager met with us and he said, you've all been hired because you have a distinct personality and you have outside interests, and that's why we want you. We don't expect you to give up everything in your life for this job. All we ask is when you come in, this job is your number one priority while you're at work. I think every single one of us does that. I spent the last 20 years in a wildly inflexible work situation where I said no to absolutely everything. I'm in a stage of my life now where I am not willing to do that. And if this policy holds, then I'm perfectly happy to tender my resignation this evening. And because I can tell you that I will have more than 3 absences this year.
Well, I have to say, if you noted, the vote was 4-1. Commissioner Francina, or Councilmember Francina, excuse me, voted no. And my impression was primarily on the issue of the Planning Commission meeting 24 times a year rather than 12 or less. And that argument did not carry with the rest of the council, is all I can say.
Right. Yeah, no, I recognize
At the same time,
her.
if someone is designated an interim commissioner or board member, they are invited to reapply, and I would expect that all of the issues that Commissioner Nolan brought up, Commissioner Lottis brought up, would be a part of that discussion if you wish to be permanently reappointed.
Well, I have issue with that because that's a control issue
Yes.
on the part of the city council, and that's something they like to do. And that's not something that I am in favor of. And as Kathy put it, that's not how you have good employees and good work ethic. That doesn't make anybody feel good about what they're doing. We are not paid, and we do go to a lot of meetings, even with the absences. And I'm not happy with this policy. I think I think that they came in with an idea, and, Ray sent a letter, which I didn't even hear any comment about. I feel like once there's an idea in the commissioner's mind, they really don't listen to anything
Councilman's
else.
mind.
The councilman's mind, yes, thank you.
Ray, you want to chip in?
I did write a letter to all the council members prior to last Tuesday's meeting, voicing my concern about, or maybe it was just after. I did write a letter voicing my concern on the vote and the policy and that agenda item. And I concur with everything what Commissioner Lottis said and Commissioner Corbin said. And honestly, I am contemplating whether this is the environment that I can serve the best with the type of hierarchical and honestly sometimes bullying language that happens amongst our council.
Yes.
It's not what I've been working towards my entire life
Right.
for a place of compassionate conversation, articulate vetting, and in terms of models, a more sociocratic model where everyone's voices are heard before hammers come down with decisions. The fact that Councilwoman Francina was the only one that brought up the number of times we meet. I remember her even saying, what the rest of you are proposing is disrespectful to the Planning Commission. She was the only one that had the courage to speak out on that. And I appreciate that. That's all I'll say for now.
Okay?
So I would propose that, thank you for chiming in, and thank you, Chair Quillisi, for letting us kind of make the case. And, I think the policy, there's absolutely no room for, the policy that it replaces talks about excused absences. And by the way, which each commission shall adopt written protocols for determining excused versus unexcused absences. I don't even know that exists.
I've been on this commission since the middle of 2016, I think. And I have asked that question a number of times. Who decides, and on what basis does that person or persons decide what an excused absence is? So what the council has done is remove that language.
Right. But in the process of doing so, it doesn't, I mean, personally, I think this policy is probably illegal when it doesn't even allow for absence for religious holidays. No waivers for any reason whatsoever. What if somebody has cancer and they need cancer treatments? I mean, it's really hastily put together and just rammed through. And I do resent the fact that there was no direct discussion with the commissioners, particularly, a commission that is really impacted by this. So I would like to make a joint commission statement to the city council, just in a matter-of-fact way, kind of restating the points that we've made that are problems with, pointing out the problems with this policy. And I'm willing to put it together in draft form and come back with the thing at the next meeting, and we could, look it over and decide if it's something we want to send to council.
I could certainly support a statement of fact of the issues that are not considered in the
Yes,
policy.
yes, agreed, totally agreed.
As far as whether 4 is the right number or 8 is the right number, I think that's why we all work for the city council, and it's their job to make that decision.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the code I don't like, but we have to enforce it whether we like it or not, and then try to change it if we can.
Yes, but there needs,
But
that's
this
right.
has really been adopted without really thinking, based on just, a certain point of view. They never talk to us. As I said, we have a liaison that's supposed to be here from the council, and that presents an opportunity
Occasionally,
to
yeah.
talk.
Well, tonight
was never brought up, ever.
specifically at council meeting, they said there'll be a council liaison at tonight's meeting to explain the policy to us. They're not here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It's on public record.
So, yes,
Well,
I
I would
just would like
invite you to
point
draft
out the
something that we can
problems,
talk
and
about at the
thank
next
you.
meeting,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and yeah, I just think that there's problems with the policy, and we need to point it out, so thank you very much.
Okay, sure. All right, well, let's move on. We did the meeting minutes. Let's move on then to discussion item number 2, Title 10 cleanup. And for those folks that are out in television land, what we're talking about tonight is Title 10 of the municipal code deals with planning and land use. And there are, early in Title 10, Chapter 2, 3 different tables that talk about respectively residential areas of the city, commercial and manufacturing areas of the city, and then other areas of the city, all with different zoning designations. And there have been in the past, or there still are in the code at this point, 3 tables that say what's permitted, what's not permitted, et cetera, in each of those zones, in each of those tables. What we're trying to do here is consolidate them, and Mr. Seibert and I have worked on this some, to look at a single table, which we all liked in the format that San Luis Obispo did it, I think. And so we've put it into a single table, and now with the staff report, I'd like to get the commissioners up to speed on the things that we have found in terms of inconsistencies or duplications or whatever that we're trying to clear up in creating a consolidated table. So, yep.
Chair Quillisi, I just want to thank you for all your due diligence. I know almost every week I thank you, but it seems to be that you just,
Here.
you take these tables and these charts and these statistics and this data and you crunch it, and somehow your brain knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's tedious but straightforward.
The
For you.
the amount of work and dedication that you have put into creating this is really pretty impressive.
Well, if
And I
it,
have to
if it
say
helps us
thank
make
you.
some good decisions on
Thank you
land
very much.
use
Yeah.
and consistency, then it was all worth it.
I would like to echo those comments. This is no easy task, what we're doing here right
Yeah.
now. We've really got to roll up our sleeves here. And I commend Chair Quillisi for doing kind of the first step in what will be, not necessarily tearing apart, but building a use chart that is comprehensive on one flowing sheet. There's a lot of cities that do this. It tends to be larger cities with a lot of different uses that have a lot of different discussions. I'm encouraged to see that as a smaller city like us, we're taking that action and we're moving forward with something. So that's encouraging for me to hear and to see. I would like to speak to some of these colors because I'm sure you're looking at the colors and it's basically the colors of the rainbow.
Yes.
But these colors actually have purpose to them and I'd like to talk about those a little bit as we dive into this. And certainly, this isn't meant to be a lecture either on my part or anyone's part. I think this is meant to be a discussion piece and to talk through this. To speak to the colors, like for instance, the purple and the red that we're seeing here tonight on the left-hand side of the column, like for instance, apiary and beekeeping at the very top of the lines 2 and 3. When there's similar types of land uses that are being identified, yes, thank you. When there's similar types of land uses that are being identified, we've highlighted that, and that's up for discussion for tonight. In the different tables that have been identified as 2.2, 2.4, and 2.6, there's an overlap of these uses being identified, these land uses being identified. And for whatever reason, some of these uses overlap from the sense of either being permitted, conditionally permitted, or prohibited. And there's some inconsistencies in that. And it's certainly up for discussion tonight. So same thing is true for the purple. I only did purple on that left-hand side because I wanted to show there's a distinction between two different uses that are top and bottom, and then two different uses, well, same uses, I guess you could say, just different ways of saying them.
Yeah, different
Different
titles
ways of-
for the same use.
Titles for the same use. I didn't mean different. Titles for the same use. So that's really what we're getting at with the red coloring. The gray that you see sprinkled throughout here, those were items that were identified as proposed changes when this went forward the last time, which was back in December, I want to say, the first part of December.
We had about 3 meetings with this, you'll recall, that we went through and made suggestions about changes. But it wasn't until we got it all into one table that we
So
could
easy
see
to see it,
there was
yeah.
some duplication or some inconsistency.
Right.
And it's even understandable if you found something where under one name it's in table 2.4, and under a similar but really identical name, it's in table 2.6, and the permissions are different. In the case of the Nature and Open Space Preserve or Nature Preserve, they were both in table 2.6. And
Yeah.
just listed differently, and we don't know why, but we're here to try to straighten it out.
Good.
So I would also like to speak to the kind of the working from right to left, the green, purple, orange,
Orange, yeah.
and then maybe kind of skin color, like a mustard. Thank you. I like mustard better. That goes on. When you're looking at a chart like this, it helps to have those colors to distinguish between maybe residential, commercial, and other different types of uses, institutional recreational components, and then some of the uses that are the zoning districts that don't necessarily have a specifically identified, like a residential or commercial, that have kind of a hodgepodge of different types of, those have been identified as well. And the interesting thing is these are also kind of, from a table standpoint, within their own respective tables, with the exception of the last half, with the OS coloring being different from the SP, TCO, and SPL. I identified those differently, but it's certainly up for discussion in terms of coloring, just because those felt like they had a slightly different performance than what you would see here for the purple. So anyway,
Yeah, the three in green, the SP, the TCO, and the SPL are overlay. So they may apply as well to one of the others.
right.
There's residential, commercial and manufacturing, other, and then overlays are the green columns. SPL, for example, is the affordable housing overlay.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so the red doesn't mean that these four reds are the same. It just means that you're joining two things that are similar.
Yeah,
There's
the
two pairs of red there.
Correct.
Right, and
Correct.
and they're just red because they're paired, not because one red thing has anything to do with the other red thing, or the red on the next table.
Right.
They're paired in that they're similar, right?
Right,
From
but for example, I mean, the apiary and the beekeeping are paired, and then mining and excavation, small scale are also paired. They're the same color as beekeeping, but that doesn't mean they're related.
correct.
Right.
That's
They're
correct.
they're just pairs, and you'll find more pairs
Yeah.
or even triplets on the next pages, either in red or in purple.
Okay.
So my thought with this is that we go through the red pieces first. Those use categories that have the similar namings, and unless you're thinking of
Or
something.
at least similar activities, even if they have different namings.
You're right,
Yeah.
right. I think that's probably the
Those
that kind of
might be the
starting point.
easiest decisions to make, and then we can come back to the others.
Right. So starting at the top, we have apiary in red and beekeeping in red. If you look at the different zones that those would be allowed in, currently you have CUPs for apiaries, but then right below it you see beekeeping has areas that are just outright permitted with no CUPs. So I think the question is, these are really, both of these uses are, I would say, the same, just labeled differently.
Shouldn't we just have one line in the table? And then,
Mhm.
if so, what permissions do we put on that line?
Correct. The thought the initial thought was just to call it beekeeping, because that falls in line with our regulations that we already have in the code, which speak to beekeeping. So there's a consistency.
I don't think apiary is back in the definitions.
Right, I think we had looked that up
Article, so,
before, I
yeah.
didn't see that either.
Looked it up. It's a place where bees are kept, so,
Oh, is
right,
it in
but
the
it's-
definitions?
well, it's
No,
in my.
you looked,
it's
oh, you
in
looked
the
it up
co-
online somewhere, sure. Right,
Right.
so it's the same
Oh, you're right.
activity.
Beekeeping is clearer to everybody.
I think so. Apiary
Right.
is a much less common used word.
Then do we need a line for apiary at all, or is it
No.
that much
No, I
distinct
think,
from beekeeping?
I think a single line that says beekeeping would be fine. The question is, because the permissions are different on those two names, what should that one line say?
Right.
But they're not different from one zone to another.
No,
So couldn't we just incorporate all of them on one
that would be
line?
fine with me. We'd have two areas where they're permitted and three where it takes a CUP.
Right.
IR is institutional recreational, and 1, 2, and 3 is because of different sizes of properties. IR3 happens to be the inn.
So are we assuming that there's no CUPs on beekeeping intentionally? that we're assuming that they were
Right,
left off intentionally?
But it's on the apiary.
I know it's on
line.
apiary, but
Yeah.
there's two different lines, so
Right.
I'm
Right.
wondering if it was intentional or
And
not for some reason.
We have a copy of the code here, maybe you could look at table 2.6 and see if there's something in there that says when it was changed. You know, there was a massive change to Title 10, I think it was, in 2004. That's where animal keeping disappeared, for example. But I suspect a lot of these inconsistencies may have come at that same time. And,
Do you have a year when that was?
oh, beekeeping's also in Title 4?
Ah,
Right.
Oh,
Right.
so.
well, who
is that in the-
updated Title 4? Not that that's any of our business, I guess.
This council added it in.
Oh,
They didn't update the whole title, they added beekeeping in.
so should,
And tied,
But the CUP from
Because you can see at the bottom, beekeeping is 25, cannabis is 26, and motorized scooters is 27. Is they're adding to state title 4.
so that's in addition to the new
that's in addition to what's
proposed,
in Title 10.
and under the proposed animal keeping.
Right, well, what you see here in the table is what exists in Table 10 now. I'm
Right.
sorry, in Title 10 now.
Right. And I do have another question. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to do beekeeping necessarily in the larger residential areas, the RO4, the RO2, RO1. I mean, we have a lot of beekeepers in the valley, and,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm not
They
sure if we
haven't
have a
really-
lot of them in the city. They may
that's
be in the
pro-
county.
Well, I think they're in the city. I do. I think maybe.
And if they are in a residential zone,
I mean, I don't know that it's.
those are illegal beekeeping
I don't-
operations, and that doesn't seem right.
That doesn't seem right, and based on the direction that we're going with, you know, back to the earth. Back to the sustainable living.
Okay, so
Um,
if I was to speak to, I think so when I was looking at this, the AOS, IR1, IR2, IR3 tend to have larger lot types of performance standards, meaning these areas are being consumed, the lots themselves are much larger than what you would see for
Right.
residential.
And RO4 and RO2 are that way too. That's minimum 4 acres, minimum 2 acres, I think.
But we're,
Right.
the Persimmon Hill homes, which have large acreage.
Yes, those
are in
tend
the
to be
city.
at least over an acre if they're not over 2 or 3
Yeah.
acres. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just
Those
raising it as a
could-
question, because I don't know why we would want to be quite so restrictive, and maybe, you know, there's a pretty active beekeeping club, and I've totally forgotten how the animal keeping ordinance regulations would weigh in on this also, so,
Animal keeping regulations wouldn't weigh in at all. Beekeeping the reason why we stayed away from beekeeping is because they already live within our code.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
So it's basically hands-off from an animal keeping standpoint, because
So
it
do
has its
we
own
s-
regulatory components.
So does that say where they can go? Does Title IV
Oh,
on the beekeeping, do we say? I mean, we can, well, just something to,
I brought up Persimmon Hill out of my own naivety, because I don't know what zone they're in.
lots less than 5,000 square feet in the area.
Right, they're fairly small.
What,
The Persimmon Hill.
what is?
lot.
Not Persimmon Hill.
No, no,
Those are all
I think-
huge lots.
yeah, those are huge lots.
2, 3,
So-
4 acres
so
probably.
I'm admitting my naivety, because
He's wondering what zone they're in.
what zone are they in?
They would be,
Persimmon Hill.
the Persimmon
oh,
Hill
let's
would be
see.
RO2 or RO4? RO4.
Okay.
So they're all 4 acres up.
So
Think.
I don't see any reason why those folks couldn't have bees there on their
Sure.
lot.
I would think that,
They do specify in the beekeeping ordinance how many hives per your lot size.
Okay, oh, good.
Oh.
so
So,
that's already,
and
and what
what's the
are
minimum lot
they?
size that allows it?
It just is no more than one hive on a lot less than 5,000. You can have 2 hives if,
So that's an eighth and a quarter of an acre.
Lots having more than 10,000, no more than one hive shall be maintained for each 5,000 square feet. I mean, you got a whole.
Okay, so
So
that's
Oh, so
that's
it's already
saying,
in there.
regulating all the
that's saying
residential.
that these are permitted
Okay.
in those areas already.
So we should just have a reference to see Title IV, Section
That's what I was
whatever.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But it
And-
would give us a good deal of clarity if we could interpret Title IV right now and
Yeah.
put the Ps in where they apply. But you said
Well, it's
5,000
everybody's-
square feet? That's the RS.
It-
That's the smallest.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
that says that beekeeping is, by that part of the code, it's allowed in all residential zones.
Right,
It's by lot size, not by zone.
just
Yeah.
depends on how many
It
boxes
doesn't,
you can have.
and I agree, we should put a reference to see Title IV, chapter whatever it is, but it sounds like we should have a single line that says beekeeping and has Ps all the way across in the residential zones.
Right,
Okay, and that would be consistent with how we
Yes.
handle
That would be
these other.
consistent with Title IV.
Yeah.
right.
And then if we just carry over whatever permissions there are in either beekeeping or apiary,
Yes.
we'd have a single line that at least seems to be a little more consistent with the rest of the code.
Yeah, that's what my comment was alluding to.
So when it's permitted, but there's further limitations.
Or, well,
then
these
this takes
references
care
over
of it.
here say, this is what explains it.
Okay. We don't need like a P with an asterisk or something.
Pardon me? Beekeeping in the VMU?
Oh, we don't have this zoning map.
I could see that. Somebody could put a beehive at the back of the Lavender Inn. Might keep all the lavender going.
Well, you could have a CUP in that case, because it is a mixture of uses, so.
Yeah, and it's more densely
And
packed,
dense-
but
it's
even,
more-
I mean, the RS is pretty densely packed.
I know, I
too.
was just looking at that from we're losing our audience.
Thank you all. Losing our
Oh,
audience.
dear.
General uses.
Guess they were sufficiently buzzed
Or board.
or bored.
Yeah. I've seen enough government, right?
Yes, that's right. What were you saying, Lucas?
I was gonna say, I was looking for the minimum lot size for the RS. I'm looking for that right now.
It's probably 4,000 or 5,000.
But what I'm hearing you suggest is we should have Ps all the way across.
All the way, I think all the way across the residential.
Yeah,
What Lucas was asking about was VMU. I can see where C1, BP, and the manufacturing districts, probably, it's not appropriate there. It might even, in the manufacturing districts, might even be bad for the bees to be there. I don't know.
Right, they're looking for,
What they're manufacturing.
Yes, it does.
But the beekeeping regulations talk about, it's, those regulations
the
are
size?
for,
9,600. Okay, so what is R1? R1 is probably 10,000? Okay,
but it's all residential.
so that says,
yeah. RO is 12,000. RO half is 20,000. RO
One
one
is
is 1
40.
acre.
1
RO
acre,
two
okay,
is 2 acre. RO
44,000.
four is
Yeah.
4 acres.
So that says, Title IV says everything but RS.
No, Title IV doesn't mention zones.
No, but it mentions lot
Lot
sizes.
size.
Lot sizes, right?
You're going by lot, that's
So unless it's non-conforming, I mean.
Well, now, wait a minute, you said RS is, minimum size in RS is 9,600?
400 less.
So that's,
9,600?
where is RS?
But we have a lot of very non-conforming lots in town then.
Yeah.
Right, we
Because
do.
50 by 150 is a pretty standard lot size.
That's it.
That's what we were living on in Redondo Beach. That's 7,500. But if it says,
RS, there's not very many RSs
yeah,
in the city.
well, there's a lot of 7,500 square foot lots,
Those are
though.
VMU.
Yeah, and VMU's minimum lot size is 8,000, or 8,500, I'm sorry.
Purpose, so you could-
Well, remember, every time one of these things get passed, it controls what happens in the future. And all the stuff that was there before, even if it's a 7,500 square foot lot, it's gonna be legal non-conforming.
Right.
And it's only non-conforming because of the new rule.
So getting back to VMU, CUP or permitted, what's your take?
I think permitted.
Or continue to prohibit?
Yeah.
I guess that's
I'm not
that's the
sure
third
why
option.
it's a CUP in the IR zones, except that maybe there are a lot more people running around in them. Would you want to warn people playing golf at the inn or students at the high school that there are beehives in the area? Is that something
Yeah.
you'd worry about?
Well, there's a section in the code that says any beekeeping needs to let a neighbor within 100-foot radius know. that-
100-foot radius of the hive,
Or
or
the property.
100-foot radius of the property,
It
okay,
doesn't identify that, but I would
yeah.
think it would be the property line, that's how you.
Yeah,
But the high school, for
Same thing
example,
we would
is an
use.
IR zone.
it is, yes,
And so theoretically, the high school could have beehives
with a CUP.
with a CUP. But but the question is, why with a CUP instead of just being permitted? If we permit it in any residential zone,
Well, because it's not covered by, these zones are not, well, VMU and these zones are not covered by the beekeeping ordinance. Or, no, I guess it is, because it would
just
still
said
be
lot
minimum lot
size. It
size.
just
Yeah,
said
that's right,
parcel
that's right,
size.
That's right.
and even the IR1, the smallest IR zone, is
Big enough,
way over 5,000 square feet.
right.
Right. I just wonder if it has to do with the, kind of the purpose of what that use, the uses that are within those institutional residential or institutional recreational, land uses. Like you're
Well,
speaking to a
okay.
school.
Yeah,
I mean, I would certainly want to be made aware if I had kids that were going to that high school, I want to be certainly made aware through some sort of notification process, not just saying it's
Mhm.
permitted.
Mhm.
Even if it's a 100-foot, and even a public hearing, so that you have a chance to.
I agree with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then, why don't we make a single line, leave the CUP on the 3 IR zones, add permission for VMU,
And residential.
because Title IV still requires notification,
And residential.
and then Ps across the residential zones.
Just one note too, just as far as, because I think of code enforcement sometimes too, is we'll get complaints, we've received complaints sometimes if somebody, there was a county property off Mercer that had a bunch of hives, and a lot of the Mercer people were getting lots of bees in their pools and their fountains and
Oh,
having big
yeah, okay,
issues.
because they are
So there's
attracted to
code en-
water, certainly.
So there's lots of code enforcement, people calling to complain, but if they're allowed, then we're gonna just say, oh, wow. So just,
Well, as
I
long
don't
as they're
know.
within the parameters of.
right.
Yeah,
regulatory
especially if the
components.
hives are in county land.
But if it was county, we just send it to county,
Right.
but they were probably allowed there, so you
Yes.
just have to deal, bees are a
But-
How do
good
you-
thing, bees
But
are a
if
good
The other,
thing.
the other issue I've got with something like that is how do you know that those bees are from that specific hive? I just don't know how you're not tagging these bees.
That's true.
It's the brand.
It's the brand,
That's right. Little tiny branding on it.
right? It's a little dot.
Yeah.
But
Little paint dots, yeah.
if we basically stick with what we do now, our regulations that we have now, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And,
And what do you feel about VMU?
VMU. Yeah, because it's a
Permitted or
little more.
CUP?
I would say CUP maybe because it's new, it's a new regulation and
And,
it's a little more
well,
dense and.
And if it's something like the Lavender Inn, it's probably a good thing to make sure that they notify, well, Title IV still says they have to notify everyone within 100 feet of the property.
Right.
Maybe
But
that's
that's
enough.
parcel owners, that's not guests.
They need to notify the guests or somehow.
Yeah, no, they do, yeah.
So let's make it a CUP
There's
in the
enough
Yeah, I-
people that
VMU,
are allergic
and
of.
then P across the board in the
Yeah.
residential, and call it beekeeping.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
All right, the next one, mining and excavation versus the same thing but on a small scale. Small scale is allowed in open space. That really
Oh my
blew my
gosh.
mind. The Ojai Meadows is one of the few open space zoned parcels in town. And mining and excavation without the small scale is prohibited everywhere.
So what are we mining and excavating at a small scale?
This must be
Or-
from the olden days where, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where this
They were taking
came
out
from.
rocks to
Sherry?
create.
I can't tell you where that would have come from, but
This seems
That
very,
one hasn't
very
come up,
old.
that one hasn't come up at the
Yeah.
desk.
yeah,
Not something that we would,
a lot of times when there is some sort of mining or excavation land use category, there's usually an ordinance that goes along with it,
yeah,
but I can find none here.
yeah, okay.
So
I would just recommend this for deletion, not even include it.
I would be perfectly happy to delete the line that has small scale in it and leave the other line there, which prohibits mining and excavation everywhere.
Oh, okay. Okay. Agreed.
What's the other side of the dais say here?
I,
Aye, matey. That's what the pirate says on his
Yeah.
80th birthday. Aye, matey.
I'm in agreement.
Okay. That all right with you, Bobby?
Absolutely.
Great, okay. Did you want to take the nature and open space preserve, Lucas? Since it's on the page, or do you
Right.
want to?
So below that is nature and open space preserve, and then below that term is nature preserve. So here, there's permitted and really permitted within one category for
Namely,
nature
open
and open
space.
space preserve. And then nature preserve has 3 areas that have it as permitted. The thought is to have those merged and name it, just use the name nature preserve.
Mm-hmm. And have the 4 permissions on that line?
Right.
I'm not really sure what open space serves. Nature preserve,
Yeah.
by the very description, I mean, you would
That's-
describe it as an open space, I would think.
It is an open space.
So,
probably we should leave it permitted there. If we don't permit it,
within the
then
open
that
space
means,
area,
yeah,
that kind of
we
defeats.
can't do it, but, yeah, I
Right.
would just leave the title as nature preserve, period.
Is,
Make it permitted in open space as well as the IRs.
I'm curious if the term nature preserve is a legal designation with some kind of document,
I'd say
whereas
it
an
should be
open
in-
space
should be in our-
preserve.
It should be in our definitions table, and it's not, so maybe it could be added
Did you
there.
beat me to that? Did you look it up?
Uh-huh.
Neither,
It's in your binder,
Oh, it is?
the definitions,
Attachment
that's
B.
Article 36.
attachment B.
So I was just, yeah, so I'm just curious if nature preserve is a legal designation where there's some documentation and a piece of land is designated that, whereas an open space preserve may be a different kind of just legal designation, where an open space preserve may not be a nature preserve, in terms of paperwork and documentation, if there's a distinction.
Okay, okay.
Well, we do have,
Open space is in the definitions section. It's on page 19,
it's
attachment
under-
B.
yep,
Yes.
we did
But-
it at the same time, I just saw it myself.
But nature preserve is not in the definitions section.
Well, let's read it out loud here. Open space, by definition, in our municipal code says, land that is kept free of buildings, structures, and paved parking areas, but specifically including restricted lands, provided, however, that previous recreational facilities, e.g. golf courses and driving ranges, shall qualify as open space at the ratio of 90% of their land area.
Oh,
So you could-
that's like open space that meets it's part of
That
what's
means Soul
the
Park
lot
Golf Course
coverage.
could be open space because the parking lot and the buildings are less than 10% of the land?
Yeah, but it's part of what when you're looking at, when you're requiring, you have a multi-density units and you require a certain amount of open space per unit and,
Clusters, is that what you're talking about?
well, I mean,
We were
it's part
allowing-
of lot coverage and open space requirements. It's generally part of a development standard.
It's
Right.
It's number
That's,
4
isn't that,
under-
it
says
seems like
it
that's
underneath
more
it,
like what
the
it's getting
percentage
at.
of gross.
Yeah, when you start
Right
talking
below it,
percentages,
open
you-
space ratio, the percentage of the gross site area that shall remain as open space.
Yeah, That's all part
That
of the
says if it's
development
less than
standard.
90%, then it's not open space.
But should we still have nature preserve? Because you're gonna look for the N when you go here, nature.
Well, maybe we should leave nature and open space preserve as the title, instead of just nature preserve.
Okay.
Then it would cover
Don't we-
both the open space areas and the institutional recreational spaces.
Yeah, it would
They
seem
do
to,
call the nature, oh, I'm sorry, Ray, go ahead.
it would seem to me that we would want to add a definition for nature preserve to distinguish between that and the golf course. So the wetlands, the Land Conservancy wetlands behind Nordhoff High is
Yeah.
quite different than Soul Park. So I'm gonna refer back to, is nature preserve, whether we have the definition or not, a totally different beast and designation than an open space preserve.
Then maybe we
It
should have.
seems like they are.
Maybe we should have two lines, but not have the words nature preserve in both lines.
That's a possibility.
So it would be open space preserve and then nature preserve,
Yes.
right?
That's
I
what I'm
see.
thinking. But we need to find a
Yeah.
definition for nature preserve to be added.
I think we can look into that. I mean, staff can look into
Yeah.
that.
Staff could add nature preserve in the definitions
Right.
article.
And we do have the nature
Figure out
preserve,
what the legal definition is.
yeah. We do have the nature preserve out there in Maricopa,
Right, that's,
but it's really, I don't know if any
that's
of
the
that's.
wetlands right next to the high school.
Right.
That's called a nature preserve, right?
It's called Ojai Meadows,
Nature,
Preserve.
preserve.
Well, it might be nature
I
preserve,
think
but it
it's-
is a,
Anyway,
I don't know.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But yeah, when I see nature preserve, I think more of an area that is deliberately maintained in an undisturbed state,
Yeah,
as opposed to the inn,
right,
which is considerably disturbed but quite open.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
well, let's do one line nature preserve and one line open space preserve.
So we're gonna keep it as two lines, is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Right.
Just get rid of the nature and capitalize open space
Open
preserve.
space preserve then would be permitted in open space, and nature preserve, no. Oh, that does get confusing then.
We could just call it open space and not say preserve. Just open space, not a open space preserve.
Because that's what the definition says.
But then.
Yeah, the
you mean
definition
say
is-
Open space is permitted in the open space zone? That begins to sound circular. So,
Well, the definition that Sherry just pointed out is, only doesn't say open space preserve. It just says on
It says
page
open
19,
space,
it
yes,
just says
right.
open space. So the line probably
Ex-
needs to say just open space, and the next line, nature preserve.
Well, except if you're saying
But,
open space,
well-
I think when you say open space, you're just generally talking about more of a development standard.
Okay, so do we then change,
Traditionally.
do we add another definition that's called open space preserve? Just like we
Why,
need
why
to
did we
add?
get away
Here's-
from not merging these, calling them both
Well,
nature and/or open space preserve?
nature preserve sounds more like something that has
Oh, you could have
deliberately been
walkways
returned.
and-
No, it's been returned to its pre-civilization state,
Land
if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the IR3s
Yeah,
are all developed, but they're largely open space.
yeah, Pratt Trail
So-
would be a nature preserve.
But you
in a
could have a
sense.
nature preserve there.
Yes, you could.
yeah.
So is there
kinda-
any reason not to merge them?
I instigated the conversation because I felt that in nature, and it was an inquiry more than me knowing truth of it is a nature preserve a different designation and legal, and a legal document that says, you know,
Okay.
this is a nature preserve,
Let me just.
and we don't have a definition for nature preserve, which we'll need
Right,
in
so
either case, whether we merge them or
Yeah.
not.
Right, right.
open space as a land use designation, as a zoning designation, is described as such. The OS zoning district is applied to areas with important environmental, historical, and cultural resources. It is also intended to provide areas of open space to protect the public from hazardous conditions. And then it goes into the density,
That sounds
One-
like a buffer around a chemical factory.
right? It almost feels like it really is meant to be a buffer and not, it does identify dwelling units at 1 dwelling unit for every 10 acres.
Okay.
Maximum density.
I mean, the
Yeah.
operative.
What about the
yeah.
definitions of the IR zones? I know that there are three
Right.
of them because of the different parcel sizes, but what
I
do
mean-
they say?
The
He's
use-
looking at early in Title 10,
Okay.
Chapter 2 right now.
Yeah, 10
not-
to the,
Not in the definitions.
not in the definitions.
Yeah.
I'm looking directly into the purpose of each of those zoning districts. So in the IR1 institutional recreational district, the IR1 zoning district is applied to areas intended for institutional or recreational land uses that will not result in commercial impacts to public facilities and services. And then it talks about the range and size. Parcels
Yeah.
may range from 20,000 square feet
But
to
that definition
9.99
carries for all
acres.
three of them.
I think it's the
No
same.
impact to commercial.
And services, it's the same, you're right, it's the same description,
Yeah.
just a different, I remember reading this, and just a different density component. So it gets less and less dense as you go from IR1 to IR3.
Well, I just think the operative word is preserve, that the preserve is an area of land that's set aside for, you know, protection of vegetation and/or just some open space.
Yeah.
And it seems, it's not really open space set aside with any kind of development.
And it's not that you're preserving something in particular,
Yeah.
except open space.
Yeah, and you could have some, you know.
'Cause the inn is developed open
Some minor kinds
space,
of
yeah.
improvements to allow
Right,
for
yeah.
access, public access, but, anyway, the operative word just seems, for both of these, seems preserve. And it seems like we could combine it and say nature and/or open space preserve, and then if you wanted to add a definition, I would add a definition for those terms that, so that it's clearly separate from just defining open space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would be, you're saying,
I get it.
calling it nature preserve nature and/or open space preserve.
With adding a definition of nature preserve in the definitions.
Okay,
Nature's open space preserve,
okay.
or open space.
Yeah.
Somehow you might
So
have
it
to
should
get, if
say,
you're
yeah,
gonna
it
have
should
both of
say
those
nature
words here, it
preserve
should
or
be-
open space preserve.
Yeah.
Oh, so the
Yeah,
the
okay.
one definition for
Would-
both of those
yeah.
things.
Because they
Well,
kind
no,
of mean,
you could have an open space preserve definition, and you could have a nature
That's okay.
preserve
Yep.
definition,
yeah,
and you could combine them on one line.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're very different,
They're-
and I
yeah.
understand we're not necessarily talking about use or the look of it,
Yeah.
and they're very different.
yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of overlap too, but
It could be different.
I think,
Could
yeah,
It
kind
might
of
be.
fine
It's sort
semantics,
of
but it would be.
developed versus non-developed open space.
Yeah, it's about the
Yeah,
development.
Okay. So we're back to merging it, yes?
I think we're back to merging it and
Okay.
putting 4 permissions
Yes.
on that one line, and then letting the definitions of nature preserve and open space preserve
Correct.
Yes.
clarify.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
Now, a little farther down the page, you've got a gray square
Yes.
on cemetery. That's because the Nordhoff Cemetery, which has existed for more than 100 years, is in a PL zone. Maybe it's because the city owns the cemetery. But at present,
It's very odd.
It's not permitted in a PL zone. And the only cemetery that we have in town that I know of is in that PL zone. I'm not clear why it was in the open space zone, but
Yeah.
maybe that was just a typo in the table.
I don't think it's a typo. I've looked it up, although I'll look it up right now. Just to clarify. I don't think it was a typo though.
Does there need to be a zoning change, or is it easier to do the CUP?
Well, and
Not that I'm
remember,
looking for
this
the-
again is controlling future things.
Yeah, I know.
So
Right.
The cemetery, if we
So if they
put,
wanted to expand
whatever we
it-
put in there, other than not permitted,
Right.
So right now,
cemetery becomes legal non-conforming.
cemetery is a CUP in the open space area, not currently allowed within the PL.
Right.
But since we have a cemetery in the PL, and I mean, I don't know if it, I doubt that it could be expanded, but maybe it could be, maybe, you know, some of the.
It's my understanding that
adjacent
that area
houses.
is near capacity.
Yeah, but,
Yeah, we tried to get a couple of spaces for my in-laws,
If not
and
at,
there were none available. This is 10 years ago,
yeah.
right.
more.
But I'm just saying, if there were some residential houses or something that ended up being purchased for the purposes of expanding the cemetery, then you would need a CUP, so,
Yep.
you know, it's probably never going to actually go into effect, but,
And you
Not a
would
bad idea
then
to just
ask for
have it
zoning
there.
change from residential to
well, that's true. yeah.
something that's where a cemetery's allowed.
Right, true, yeah.
But they couldn't
True.
afford to buy a residential lot to expand the
Well,
cemetery.
most likely not.
But I
Unless
think
we
it-
all
I
die
think
of the
it's fine to put-
coronavirus.
I think it's fine to put some sort of permission in that cell so that the cemetery's not illegal.
Right.
Yeah, it's not necessarily legal. I would just say it's non-conforming by the
Yeah.
standards we have
Yeah.
today.
Right.
Um,
It's certainly entitled to be there.
Well,
The term illegal,
non-conforming really kind of means it doesn't meet all the standards, but we're not prohibiting it.
correct. If you're prohibiting it, you're identifying
But
that
a dash in
throughout
that cell means we're prohibiting it.
From any future.
from any.
From future changes.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's prohibition, which is clearly identified. I think STRs is a clear prohibition, versus not identifying it as a permitted conditionally permitted, or just, in this case, just not identified, so it falls into a non-conforming category. The non-conforming category, we have provisions in our code that speak to non-conforming, right? So then it falls into that category as to whether or not expansions could take place, unless we identify it as being strictly prohibited, which we
Which
do have some of those.
would mean we have a line in the table and a dash in the cell.
Yeah, but I understand, I see where you're coming from with the prohibited versus non-conforming. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
in terms of how we're identifying that here, I would say it's non-conforming versus prohibited.
Agreed. I agree
Well,
with that.
it's non-conforming because it existed before the rule was instituted.
Now,
Probably.
if somebody wanted to go in to that location and
Or,
they
or
said,
any other PL
hey, I want to
zone.
go into the PL zone. I want to build the infrastructure for a cemetery. We would say that is a prohibited use within that area. If it exists, it's non-conforming. Does that confuse things even more?
No, I
My
think I
planner brain
understand that,
doesn't
yeah.
confuse it, but
No, all the rules apply to the future. They're
Correct.
very, very rarely retroactive.
unless it's spelled out in the code.
Yeah.
All right, so,
So, should we put CUP in there and make it?
what's your guys'
Sure.
what's the flavor here?
Yeah, maybe,
That would
maybe
mean that with the CUP,
you could,
the World University could convert part of its property into a cemetery.
that's true. But also maybe part of Sewell Park.
Or part of Soul Park, or the back part of the school district property could become a cemetery.
But with a
With a
CUP, it's
CUP.
completely discretionary, yes, no,
Yes,
Right.
yes with conditions, so,
It has a public hearing process, so.
yeah,
okay?
All right.
okay.
Let's do that then.
Let's move on to,
Ooh, now we have a triplet.
And lodge is a new category?
Lodge is a new category. It's actually
it's been a relocated category.
derivative
if I recall
of
correctly.
an existing category that was several different things.
Wait, should we talk about, we could talk about that one now. I'm trying to remember where that one was at.
I'm just going down the line, and that's the first one that
Right.
shows up.
Oh, because it's hotel motel, lodge, timeshare.
Oh, that's over in services,
Facility.
right? Yes. That's on the
Right.
third page.
Mm-hmm.
That red pair at the bottom of the third page.
Oh, wait, have you skipped down to, where are we? Lodge?
Ray brought up lodge.
Oh, okay.
Where did we put lodge?
second page, under library.
And what is a
Oh, there it
lodge?
is, right, it's just,
It's the first one above the triplet.
yeah, you're right.
And then it's,
Right.
on the next page, it's under services, right after hotel motel.
We had one line that said hotel, motel, lodge, and timeshare facility.
Yes.
And at least in our discussions, we thought those three things were probably sufficiently different that they should be treated differently.
How's a lodge defined?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
wondering,
that's,
what is a lodge
that's
anyway?
exactly where I was just going.
Is it a
A
lake?
lodge is not a
lake-
short-term rental log cabin.
Yeah, right, it's a
I
place
think
of
a
assembly.
lodge is Knights of Columbus or
Oh, that's
Elks
what
Lodge
you mean.
or something of that sort.
Oh.
I
I
think
know, I remember Joe Fish
it's more like a
was-
social club.
Yeah.
Really?
Assembly. But I remember Joe
that's right.
talking about, certain limitations in terms of handling, basically, the broad range of places of assembly.
Right, because you
And
get
so
into.
Is this what we're doing? Is that is that why we're,
You're getting into something called, there was an act in the early 2000s, I want to say it was in 2000, referred to as RLUPA.
Arlupa, I kept my notes.
You did good.
The
And I-
Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act,
Right.
Arlupa.
So that's ensuring
Of
that the
2000, it's
religious
a federal
components,
law.
right, are all, everybody's playing in the same sandbox versus treating some uses as prohibited, but then allowing some of those uses that are similar in nature as either permitted or through some sort of discretionary process. So lodge falls within that category for
Also,
places,
it
with
is in the
places to settle.
definitions on page 5,
It is?
attachment
oh, I just
B.
looked.
Yeah, I was looking for it. I wasn't seeing it here.
Attachment B, page 5.
Club lodge,
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
club.
It's under club. All
Lodges and private
Meeting
meeting
hall.
halls.
Oh, there we go.
right, there we go.
It almost seems like that phrase, clubs, lodges, and private meeting halls
Right.
should be
That's how it exists
this
currently.
category.
That's how it
Yeah.
is
Then the
currently.
line that
Then
says
we'll be able to
lodge
find
should
it.
probably say what it says in the definitions.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
what I.
Clubs,
that's what I-
lodges, and private meeting
That's
halls.
was I, and
That's what I was gonna say
Then you
too,
can
because
find the
that
definition.
clearly
Yes.
then
Good
distinguishes.
idea.
Because that then clearly distinguishes from a lodge that's a vacation.
It's on page 1.
Yeah.
It's on page 1.
Okay.
Clubs, lodges, private meeting halls. It's already on page 1.
Wait, page
One.
Of your chart. Your
Oh.
chart.
That's
Right.
already on there? Okay, so
Recreation, under recreation.
Oh, okay.
it is, so maybe,
You don't need.
okay, so that leads, so
how do
that
those
leads.
permissions compare to lodge?
Okay, so that leads me to believe the reason there was a hotel, motel, lodge, and timeshare facility, that the lodge that is stated there
It's different.
is a multiple occupancy vacation type lodge, not the club organization type lodge. And that's why it got on that line with hotel, motel,
So
and lodge.
it's more like a hotel or motel, but it may be a single residential unit for a larger number of people?
Okay, so we already have.
Well, yeah, like in Yosemite, there's lodges, right?
Oh, yeah, we stayed there once, right?
Right,
Yosemite Lodge.
so I think
It was a motel.
I think it was intentional that the word lodge was on that hotel motel timeshare, and that the club organization lodge, that's a different kind of lodge.
Right.
Where's the hotel motel thing you're talking about?
That's what I'm
Page
looking
3.
for.
It's on page,
three?
yeah, page
Page
3.
three.
It's
Crossed
highlighted in red.
Thank you, Ray.
Under services. So I think
It's
the same
the
word
red
was
pair at the
used.
bottom of
with-
page 3.
I think the same word was used for two distinct items.
I think, yeah, as we talked about timeshare facility, I think that is different. Because
Yes,
the person or persons staying there have some ownership rights.
yes,
Whereas a hotel, motel, or lodge, they don't.
yes. So the question is, do we
I think you're right.
do we still keep lodge? Do we do the line above that, the red line above hotel, motel, lodge, timeshare, the line above timeshare facility, we could put hotel, motel, lodge, and
think
that's a
you're right.
different kind of lodge.
That's fine.
Then the question, which we've taken up before, when you see multiple things on one line and a bunch of different permissions, which of those permissions actually attach to which of those things?
All of them.
Or do all permissions attach to all those things?
It looks like
Is
all of them.
that's the clear language.
Right.
Right.
Well, if we go back to page 2, I mean, I'm not sure, I just think we should just take out that line.
Which one?
Well, the
When it
lodge
says
on
lodge,
page
Yeah.
2 would
Yeah,
go
we should
away.
take
Go
out
away.
that
Okay,
line.
so we're
Yeah,
gonna
that
do-
would go
We already
away.
have it.
But then the
Gonna
question
delete.
is, what does go on the line that says hotel, motel, lodge? Because it's different from what was on the lodge line.
Oh, I see.
Because
How
PL,
are you differentiating a lodge from a hotel, motel on
We're-
that one?
I don't think we are.
it's,
It's the
what
same.
we're saying
We
is
don't
the
have a
same thing,
definition.
but it may
Well,
have
the
the name
problem
lodge
is,
in it somewhere as an attempt to make it seem something other than just a motel.
but the problem is, we have lodges here defined along with clubs and
Right.
private meeting halls, so it's not really a hotel. It's a place of assembly.
Right. So the line that says lodge should probably say clubs, lodges, and private meeting halls.
Which it says on the first page.
Which it says.
We've
on
already
page
got
one.
it, we've
Which we
got it.
already have.
There we
Right.
have it. Yeah.
So
It's taken care of.
So the question is,
I don't
on
think
the,
we
on
should.
the
They're
hotel
different.
motel
We don't need
line,
it.
do we add
No.
lodge?
No,
Or if,
Because the definitions don't.
Or,
it just
or
says-
would it just be a matter of common understanding
Yeah.
that that kind of a lodge
okay,
is
Is
a
a
hotel or
hotel.
motel?
okay, so
Yeah.
we've distinguished that, and we'll just take that line away that's
Yeah.
just said lodge on page
Right,
2.
we don't need that.
And we won't use the term
One
lodge
style
on
of
hotel
lodge
motel.
fits on page 2 already.
Yeah.
The other style of lodge fits on page 4 already.
And then,
But then
right, and
timeshare
then some-
facility,
and then some permissions were added, it looks like, on the hotel motel line. They were dashes.
they were transferred up from the timeshare facility line.
Correct.
Ah,
so they
got
would,
it.
that would.
So
keep
that's
it-
C1 BP and VMU.
Okay. Now, we've had this discussion, though, about motels and hotels. I thought we had decided it would be a CUP in the C1. That- You know, that's the problem with these minutes, I have to say, because
The minutes are very terse.
we have no way of easily knowing what the decisions were, because we've discussed a lot of this stuff, and I've noticed some, what I consider to be inconsistencies, or maybe it's my memory.
Well,
Could be my memory.
there was a
Lucas-
lot,
Lucas
there was a
has
lot
been
that was
back through the last
yeah, there was a
3
lot that was discussed. I didn't necessarily see hotel motel as,
That
going
was
to a CP, but I remember there being a discussion
That's a
about
big
it.
discussion, and I would still argue, if we do not make hotels and motels a CUP use, we are the only town in the entire state that does not do that. Because hotels and motels have major impacts, you know, people, traffic, cars going in and out, a roof deck,
Yeah.
you know, spas, events, weddings. Without a
Right.
CUP, we do not have a good method of controlling what is appropriate for the location, wherever it's going to go.
I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah, I know. So I feel very strongly about this one, and I
Fine.
keep, I've had to fight this fight like several times, and
fight this fight.
I really think that a hotel motel needs to be a CUP across the board. Let's see.
In the future,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the future.
Right, exactly.
I would sign on to that.
C1, BP, VMU, oh, especially VMU.
And also the
And-
IR 2 and 3.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're saying,
I wouldn't argue with that. I would think we would want to take a close look at somebody that wants to put a hotel in.
right,
We did a couple months ago, right? Next
Right
week.
on Montgomery Street, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we really should be, I think that project went away, but it was, had some good aspects to the project idea. But I would want to really be able to have the control of a CUP with it.
I think there would be a DRP that would be required, so it would be coming before this commission either way, so.
Right, but the
But the
CUP is
CUP
more
would have-
powerful.
A
Well,
have
DRP
special
has
fin-
to do
right.
more with the appearance than the use.
Yeah, and we have
Right.
special findings with the CUP, and we have much more power to prove, deny.
CUP is revocable, so I think that you're right
Yes,
with that.
Yes.
So if they don't build it the way they're supposed to, we have some
Make it-
power. They put too many red signs up.
There have been horror stories about developers building a house that's too tall, and then it becomes a question, do you make them take it down to what they were allowed to build? I think,
The same issue would arise with a CUP, though. If they built it too
yes,
tall
yes. But
with a CUP.
But at least you have, yeah, but it just gives you more, it gives you a stronger police power to regulate,
Right,
so.
Well, I'm happy to make the hotel motel line in the 5 places that it appears make it a CUP. That is
Yeah.
C1, BP, BMU, IR2, and IR3.
So what happens in an instance like the Oaks that's being redone, but it's already there? They're gonna have to
The
get
C-
it,
The CU, if
have to
in
get it-
fact they had a CUP when they put that thing up, which I highly doubt,
No, because it was
It's old.
permitted.
It was
It's
permitted.
But if they come, if they want to make changes, I mean, if they're really, if it's a substantial change from the existing, whatever they were doing, and you can argue it, you know, it's a judgment call, clearly. But it just depends on what they want to do. You
Right,
know,
so
and
we're-
they might be potentially subject to a CUP if we have a CUP down here.
right, so that,
if
absolutely.
we have a CUP down here, I don't think staff can waive it.
Right, no, right. No,
So it wouldn't be potentially subject.
well, it would be a judgment call in terms of, are they just reinstituting a use that already existed and they're operating it in a similar manner to what was already done? Or are there substantial changes? Because then then you could argue it's a new use.
Right,
And
so I would be
the
turning to
new use
the-
does require a CUP.
I would be turning to the non-conforming standards of our code in addition to what the
Right.
parameters are for
Right.
conditional use.
We already have, although I don't recall seeing it anywhere in the table, we do have a category called minor CUP required.
yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, but
Right.
that's.
And we also
Director,
suggested
isn't it?
that there be an administrative use permit,
Oh,
like if people wanted to build a fence.
right.
It doesn't cost anything necessarily, or $10 for the permit or something, but they have to come in
Nominal fee.
and be made aware of the rules.
Right,
But that wouldn't be appropriate for this.
No.
And further, and with something like the Oaks being remodeled, whatever they want to do with it, we would piggyback. We'd have a design review and CUP at the same time, same meeting, and we would just be approving two different permits with the
Right.
appropriate
Multiple,
findings.
multiple case files for
appropriate
one
conditions.
project moving forward.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
This table doesn't say anything about design review permits,
No, it's handled separately.
because this is land use.
Right.
Okay.
I agree with you, with the CUP across the board.
CUP in
I do too.
actually, it's 5 areas.
5 areas.
yeah,
And then we've got timeshare facility
Which is in-
just in IR1.
and why do we even want to go there? Timeshares are hotels.
Well,
And.
they're different from hotels in the sense that the people that stay there have some ownership rights. People that stay in a hotel don't have any ownership rights in that room.
True, but the operation is very similar.
There's usually an
I mean,
on-site manager,
there
I
are
think.
communities that prohibit timeshares. They don't allow it, especially vacation places.
Wait, say that again?
There are communities that do not allow timeshares
Oh, yes.
for reasons that are very similar to not allowing Airbnbs.
Right.
And,
I would say the Airbnbs are a separate
Yeah, of course.
category altogether.
and
we have that
No, I agree with that.
proposed
They're
in here
not
as well.
timeshares.
Right. And timeshares have this ownership component to
do,
it as well, where
right.
you've got
So
fees
it's not
coming
really,
in.
yeah, it's not really a short-term rental.
Right.
Well, it's a short-term
Well, it is,
stay.
It's a
because-
part-time
Definitely a
ownership.
short-term stay.
The operational characteristics are definitely shorterm stay
Yes,
characteristics.
sure.
But do we have a definition of timeshare? I mean, there's something in state law, I think, but, anyway, I don't know why we would even allow timeshares, to be
Well,
honest with you.
let's get a feel for each other's thoughts on that, whether we think timeshares are appropriate to have.
Timeshare is not in the definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it.
28 and 29.
I want to
goes
hear
from
more
theater-
about your
Theater to
objection
tower.
to timeshares, if there's more to say about
Well,
it.
because timeshares can be more limiting in terms of access to the general public, unlike a hotel. And,
Deliberately, because the people that stay there own that piece.
I know,
Yeah.
I know, but is that something that we're okay with in the community? And,
But a lot of
No,
times, the
it-
timeshares are actually part of a hotel, aren't
Right.
they?
yeah, but then it's a hotel, so it would be reviewed as a hotel. So, I mean, I don't know.
I know we're looking at the future. Currently, are there any timeshares in the city?
I'm not aware of any.
I
Is
don't
staff
think
aware
so.
of any? I don't think so.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay,
There was a big period of time when lots of timeshares were being built,
yeah.
you know, the 80s and the 90s, and
Were they-
they were
Built in residential zones?
very
or
popular.
is these are permitted in
Only
business
commercial, VP,
professional,
VMU.
yeah.
They're not so
Well, as long as it,
fashionable
I just
anymore.
don't think they should be permitted, they should be CUPs.
Okay.
Because they are short-term use, they impact the character of
If
the
it's
community.
CUP, then what zones? Or should it be the
Well,
same zones as hotels and
Yeah,
motels?
Yeah, yeah,
So
the very least,
we've taken
it should
this
be.
long definition and we've just eliminated lodge from it.
Right,
So it says hotel, motel, timeshare facility.
right,
okay, yeah,
There you go.
all right.
and it's all C.
Oh, I got it. Yeah,
That's an
yeah,
easy
And it's
solution,
all CUP.
sure.
more straightforward, that's fine.
Okay. Let's get caught up here.
All right, let's go back to page 2.
2?
Yes.
Yeah,
Right below the line that we deleted called lodge.
we got sidetracked
Oh,
with
yes.
lodge, which went down a rabbit hole. Understand that rabbit holes are a welcome discussion tonight,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so we have outdoor recreational facility, comma, accessory, park playground, and park playground recreation center. Now, I think of a park as a government-owned plot of land that's set aside for recreation. The recreation center might be publicly owned or privately owned.
True.
Playground, I think of, well, a playground, I have seen playgrounds in the middle of privately owned apartment complexes. So,
But now these are, we're talking about basically public types of uses, right? Well, I don't
they're,
know. IR1,
well, the IRs are all private,
Like
that's all
institute,
private
privately-
property, yeah. Well, it might be. Actually, the high school is an IR zone,
oh, right,
Right.
I don't-
right.
because it's an institution.
Well,
Right.
I do have a question. So what's the accessory part of this mean? Outdoor recreational facilities, comma, accessory. I didn't quite, and there's several, that appears in several
Accessory
places.
to the main use, like, if you had,
Oh,
you have, like, even like, say, 1202 East Ojai Avenue, there was a
Yeah.
proposal where they were gonna have like an event, a center for families and whatnot, so you'd have your outdoor, like a miniature golf course or a batting cage or something like, accessory to,
I see.
but it's outdoor.
Okay. But we probably don't really have a
One
definition
example,
for
if you
it.
have more.
I think that's a good example.
No, outdoor, we have outdoor dining and outdoor dining permit
Mm-hmm.
in the definition section, but nothing about outdoor recreation.
Or recreation center, neither are in definitions. Park and playground is. But
That's-
recreation center and.
Park and playgrounds is defined, you're right.
Yeah.
Public Parks,
Park and
playlots,
playground ought to
playgrounds,
at least
athletic
be in the PL zone, because all of our parks are PL zone.
Well, park, playground, and rec center is in the PL
PL.
zone.
Oh,
Oh,
but
yeah,
park
yeah,
playground
yeah.
isn't, yeah.
Well, what,
Playground is in the IR zones.
what if,
Accessory outdoor recreational
So why do we have
facility is the different.
Two lines for park, playground, rec center.
Right, it should just be,
One.
it could be one line and then rec center is added to the definition on attachment B, page 19, and have it say, park playgrounds and recreation center.
Do we have a definition
page
of park?
19.
Well, we do.
Oh.
Public parks, play lots, playgrounds, and athletic fields for non-commercial neighborhood or community use, including tennis courts. Page 19 of
Okay.
30,
Right.
attachment B.
Yeah, because we do have the recreation center.
Right, so maybe just add
Yeah.
recreation center to that definition,
Because we say, yeah.
since there is,
tennis
since it's not
courts,
under
We have
R.
athletic fields, we have, yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if park playground is one line because the IR, well, the IR zones are partly public and partly private.
Mm-hmm.
The inn is IR3, the high school, I think, is IR2.
Mm-hmm.
And the rec center is a CUP and OS. So does the rec center just need a separate line, and then park and playground is its own separate line?
So that rec center would be permitted in PL and needs a CUP in the open space zone?
And that's the only thing on that line, and then the line above it is park and playground.
I could
And
live with
just
that.
permitted for that, for park and playground would just be permitted?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd go for
Well,
that.
in fact, park and playground is currently not, park and playground without recreation center is not permitted in the PL zone.
And it
But
should-
all of
and
our
it should-
parks are.
And it should be,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Pardon me?
In our current code, it's under park, playground, recreation center.
Under recreation center, with recreation center, but park playground by itself, without recreation center, it's the next line in the table.
So let's see here.
Oh, we're looking at the table.
Hold on.
We're not looking at the code.
IR. Park, playground.
Recreation center is not in the definitions, recreational vehicle.
Right.
So,
So we need a definition
We
of a
need-
rec center,
We need to add rec center,
and it should have its own line, we're saying, and then park and playground are gonna be together.
yeah,
park and playgrounds should be permitted in
And-
PL,
and OS, or,
Yes.
well, I don't know.
maybe not in
OS2 or not?
OS.
It was a
Um,
CP, right?
Wait, you're saying that we do need a definition for
Rec
recreation
center.
center? I thought we were just gonna add it to the park and playgrounds.
we're giving it its
Now
own
we're
line.
distinction again? Okay. So we give it its own line, it needs its own
Permitted
definition. We give it its own line, it needs its own definition then.
and permitted in PL, right?
And permit parks and playgrounds in PL,
Yes.
Yes.
not currently there. And then the next
And
line.
Probably OS too.
But now we're back to saying what, oh, the outdoor recreation center, outdoor recreational facility accessory. That's in the IR zones, okay. And I guess that's all right, because it could have, a primary focus is institutional, but there could still, and recreational, but there could still be a park or a playground as a part of it.
So we need to make sure there's a definition for outdoor recreational facility accessory.
There isn't right now.
Yeah, there's not.
Okay, so that's a second definition that needs to be added along with recreation.
So we're gonna have one line, it sounds like, well, first of all, looking at the top of page 2, we're deleting the line that says lodge.
Correct.
We're leaving the outdoor recreational facility accessory as is. Park and playground changes in that we permit it in PL. And then the line below would just be recreation center. And that's CUP and open space and permitted in PL. Does that work for everybody?
Are we permitting the park playground as a
In
P in
P-
open
P
space?
in- Not in open
Not in
space, in
open space?
PL.
Because it used to
It's
be a
P.
CUP, but, oh, we're not gonna permit it as a P?
Well, see,
Right,
when
it
it
used to
says
be.
park, playground, recreation center, those are not all the same
Right,
thing.
right, exactly.
So which did the CUP go with? I'd say it went with the
I-
recreation center.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just saying, I think the
Yeah.
P would be okay in the OS.
For the recreation center?
No, for the park and
For park and playground
Yeah,
In OS.
in OS.
no?
No, I'm just saying, not no.
Okay,
What does that mean?
okay.
I was following the thread that you were just
Okay.
mentioning.
So,
It was,
For park, playground, and recreation center, it's all combined.
right,
It's all CUP in
Yeah,
OS.
But we're permitting the parks and playgrounds everywhere, so.
but would it be a CUP in OS or just permitted in
I'd
OS?
say permitted.
I think so. So in the second of those 3 red lines, we'll add a P under OS and a P under PL. And then the third of those 3 lines, we're deleting the words park playground.
And what about the IR for the park and playground?
The IR 1, 2, and 3 are permitted.
they're already.
Currently
there.
permitted.
Right,
Currently
okay, we're gonna
permitted,
leave
yes.
that,
Yeah.
I think so.
okay.
Okay.
How much tolerance do we have tonight?
I need a
This-
pencil.
This is,
This is so much work.
you
Steve.
read
my
the work, do you read the Week magazine ever? There's a section in there that's called boring but important. And that's what we're doing.
I wouldn't consider this boring. This gets me,
Well,
my
yes.
Yeah,
planner,
kind of-
I get jiggly.
If you have an eye for detail, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, and I like the discussions too.
Right, okay. So-
Perhaps if it was at lunch,
Pardon me?
if we were doing it over lunch,
Wine.
more interesting than it.
Yes.
It's the Pinot, that's the missing piece.
Lunch with a glass of wine, you might either get a whole lot more or a whole lot less done.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, let's go on to residential uses. Oh, now that says note
Oh,
two
wait a minute. Oh, okay.
instead of an A, B, or C note.
So the school
my
stuff
error.
is all, the school stuff is all as it is now in the code?
Where are
I
you?
mean, because we skipped down to
Yes,
residential
there's
uses.
several lines about schools.
Oh,
and
there's
a
some
couple
red-
about
Studio.
studios.
There's red peas under religious facility that were added.
Right, so those
Oh,
were added
okay.
for consistency purposes
Okay.
with, for our lupa.
Oh, with our lupa.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, but nothing in schools was changed.
Why do we
Right.
have,
Yeah, and we,
so we have two lines that say caretaker and employee quarters.
Yep. And one of them you see is in table 2.4, and one is in table 2.6.
right,
Actually, one is in table 2.4, yeah, and the other is in table 2.6, and the permissions are different.
And one says and employee quarters, and one says
Or,
or
yeah.
employee quarters. So
Now,
does
we
that
got into
have to
this,
do
is that
with the?
an inclusive or an exclusive? If it's the or, does it mean you can have one or the other but not both?
Well, I wonder if
Does
this
the
is
other one mean you
a,
have to have both, or?
I wonder if this is a timeline conversation of when those were put in, and one is superseding the other in historically.
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I don't have an answer for that one. That's a good question. We can do a little bit of digging on that.
Yeah, one might just be more current, and that's what we
Yeah.
need to go with.
Yeah.
The definition uses or.
Why are we permitting theater and auditorium in the
Worry.
BP?
Uh,
Wait a minute.
I mean, that,
Wait, new conversation.
yeah, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, did I jump in?
We're on caretaker.
Caretaker
Oh, sorry.
first.
We were trying to resolve caretaker.
I'm just on my own line of thinking, sorry,
We can go back up, but let's resolve caretaker first.
sorry.
You say in the definition section, it says or,
Yes.
that means to me, a particular structure could be one or the other.
Yeah,
But
by
it doesn't-
definition.
It doesn't prohibit having both, and one could be one structure could be one, and a different structure on the same parcel could be the other.
So,
But the permissions are totally different on
well,
those
we
two
could
lines.
just combine them, it looks like.
I would think so. I would think we could just combine the two lines and have the permissions that are there carried over into a single line.
Yes, it looks like that should be fine, I think.
I do too.
Agreed.
Great, okay.
Okay, done.
All right, so we would call it,
Call it or, because that's in the definitions section.
Yeah, call it or, and then drop down the,
Just-
3 Ps from IR1, IR2, and
Yeah.
IR3.
And then home occupation,
Wait, let's go back up to theater auditorium, because that's what Commissioner Lottis had a question about.
I mean, again, it only applies to something new, but, a theater could bring in a fair number of cars,
In
and,
fact, the Ojai Playhouse is in C1.
wouldn't theater
Right.
be, shouldn't that be allowed in a PL?
A theater or auditorium,
Yeah.
that's a public assembly use.
oh, maybe.
Right.
Well, I forget what the
There
zone,
is a dance studio in a PL zone here in town. They have recitals and
The,
stuff.
what is it called?
Yeah, but I would say,
Chaparral Auditorium is part of that landmark over there.
I would say that would fall into
That's
Dan.
actually in PL land.
PL. I'm
Yeah,
talking
but
about
the-
BP.
The dance studio is not permitted in PL.
It's BP I'm talking about.
Oh,
Oh, and BP, it's
What this is, what
a
this,
permitted
an
use.
example of what this might refer to is the World University that wants to convert from PL to BP.
hmm.
Would it be acceptable if they had an auditorium of some sort there as well as some offices, so that people could have bigger
Maybe.
meetings.
Maybe,
Well,
but I'd like to.
and there used to be an auditorium there.
Oh.
Was there? I don't,
Oh, at the
I
World,
was
yeah.
not familiar with
No, I
the
used to,
structure
I
of it.
taught a few things there. There was an auditorium that held about 60, 80 people.
Okay,
So, I mean, but I think something like that in a BP zone, it's not even C1. Aren't there, I mean, aren't some of these BP zones, don't they have nearby residences?
Very
Resident-
few of them.
Really?
Yes, some of them do.
So I'm a little lost in
Back
which
up- they back up to
conversation we're in right now.
Topa.
Are we on the theater auditorium conversation?
Theater, that's where we're at, yeah.
this is the theater auditorium.
That's where we're
Just
living
keep
right
the
now.
Direction going.
Okay. And so are we trying to decide whether in PL it needs to be permitted, or are we trying to decide whether it needs a CUP?
I think we're looking at both BP
Oh, okay.
and maybe PL, should it be allowed there? Public, what is the definition of PL zone?
Fairly.
Oh, I do have my
Public
zoning.
land.
Here, let's see.
PL zone, that would be in
Here.
two dash, 2.5
See, I'm getting it right.
or 2.7, 2.7, I bet.
So PL is public, quasi-public district. The PL zone district is applied to areas appropriate for public
And
facilities,
2.7.
government offices, and cultural facilities. The maximum building intensity varies and shall be determined through the development review process on a case-by-case basis. The PL
Public-
zoning district is
The
consistent with the
definitions of
public
the zones
wait,
usually
wait,
come
quasi-
just before
public
the
land
table.
use.
He's reading it.
He's reading it. You're talking
Designation
over
of the
him.
general plan. So it looks like
Public facilities could,
it's public, government, and cultural facilities, so there's
Theater and
some pretty
auditorium.
distinct categories that are being identified there. Cultural facilities is an
might
interesting
want-
one.
yeah, it'd be like
That would be a
presentation.
theater and auditorium.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not there in the
What's
PL zone.
definition of the BP?
So let's, I'd say let's allow it in, permit it in the PL zone.
Wait, hold on, BP, is
Yeah.
BP, you could have that below here, where is it at?
Required by-
It's by the commercial.
Further up
If
here.
somebody
Oh, I see.
wanted to come in and put another theater on Ojai Avenue, would that be bad?
Oh,
If it
just
had
because
parking.
we need require a CUP doesn't mean that it's bad at all. It
But
just
right
means-
now, it's not permitted.
It gives discretion.
Oh, I'm
Theater
seeing the
auditorium in
C1.
C1.
Yeah, no, I think,
Oh, it
BP
has,
definite, not
BP.
definition, but the purpose description.
has
reads as
cultural
follows.
facilities in it too.
Hold on. The BP's, I know, we got a lot of thoughts going on here. Hold on a second.
Scotty,
The
I'm
BP zoning district is
still recovering
intended
from being sick.
to provide, so the BP zoning district is intended to provide attractive areas within the small town historic context of the downtown arcade area. This zoning district includes diverse, compatible land uses, including offices, specialty retail, restaurants, cultural facilities, and bed and breakfasts.
That's BP.
That is business, professional, commercial, BP.
Can I see your land use thing chart? No,
Oh.
the map.
Oh,
You don't have one?
I don't have
I'm
one.
sorry.
sometimes
Okay, so cultural uses there too.
It's in BP as well as in PL.
All right.
Right.
We don't have too much BP anyway.
Oh, it's the dark blue.
It's the blue.
Or is it light blue? Light blue is the,
Dark blue. Dark blue.
Mm-hmm.
PL is light blue.
So we want to add it in BP?
well, it's
think-
already permitted in the BP. I was just, and then it's a CUP in the VMU.
Theater auditorium is not already permitted in BP.
yes, it is.
Yeah, P.
The line just
Am I on
above
the wrong
residential
line?
uses.
Oh, sorry, I was on the line above it. Okay. I'm going back to my paper.
But I think
It should be
theater
in
auditorium,
PL too, right?
it should be in PL and it should be in C1.
I agree. But my preference would be CUP, but I think it should be allowed to be considered at least
For the PL,
for, no,
for the C1?
Commercial.
C1.
C1.
CUP
mean,
and
I would be
C1 and a
CUP.
CUP and PL.
I would be CUP, C1, BP, and probably PL, because unless we change some of these PL zones, they're in weird spots with houses around them, like, okay, what if that wellness center that we went through design review?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what
The
it's called.
214 West Aliso.
Yeah, so what if they want to turn that into an auditorium?
Well, they have a great open space there that if you put rows of chairs in would look a lot like an auditorium
Mm-hmm.
Right.
already. And they called it a community center.
But I don't
Right.
think the residents around there, they might not be so happy without some chance to really weigh in on the operational characteristics and how it might impact them.
The CUP would allow for that
But
Yeah.
discretion.
they already can have gatherings and things in there, so how will it
Right,
really be?
but we're talking about the future. That one's
Yeah, I
done.
mean, there were problems
But
with
if it
that.
came up again,
There were a lot of problems and, in terms of viewing that as a community center and.
Is anybody
with
even
its
using that building? I
don't
haven't
know.
seen anything happen in there.
actually, what came before us was a DRP that had to do with striping the parking lot and putting a pergola and a ramp from part of the parking lot up to the front door.
Right. But there was a in-depth conversation of why was it being called a community center?
Yes, there was.
What that definition
Right.
was.
Squeezing an elephant into a, I don't know what,
Yeah.
box.
Way back to PL.
But.
So in the
I-
future,
I could
in the
argue a
future,
theater
you
might
want.
not be all that different from operation as a community center too. So-
And the C1 zone is generally buffered from residential.
Yes, agreed,
I think we might go with a P in the C1 zone
okay.
and with a CUP in the PL zone.
Yeah, because PL does have more residences
And
nearby.
and what about the BP zone?
The BP, once again,
It's kind of.
there's
it is
very
kind
little of
limited.
it, but it's
Yeah,
pretty well buffered from
yeah,
residential areas.
Okay, I'll go with
Okay.
that.
Okay, so we'll put a P in C1,
P and BP.
P in BP, a CUP in VMU, and a
PL.
CUP in PL.
All right.
Okay.
Now we're down to home occupation.
Now we're down to home
We
occupation.
just need one for that, don't we?
Yeah, one's plural, one's not.
Yes,
I don't know of a whole lot of places that have home occupations,
Right.
right.
so,
So I'd say, let's merge the two, and wherever it has a P,
Keeps it.
have it in that line.
okay,
Agreed.
Now,
There is
you
the
put a
gray area.
there for IR1.
correct.
That's the smallest institutional recreational.
Right, does somebody have that map, the IR1, what does that cover?
IR1 is kind of a pale green. There's one right there, I think.
I thought, oh, thank you.
That's the hospital. That's the hospital property.
And is that the
And there's churches.
Oh,
Uh,
church.
And
a
they're
church,
IR1.
and then, another church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's two churches and the hospital along Maricopa Highway.
So this is the land use.
Oh,
I'm like, wait a minute. Something-
sorry,
Zoning,
Oh,
probably that one.
zoning map has just those are the only parcels I see that are IR1.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it kind of doesn't even,
Well, a church might have an
No,
auditorium.
I have this, Sherry.
We're talking about home
Home
occupation.
occupation.
I'm
This
sorry,
is what
home
I got.
occupation.
yeah, I don't even think that.
Sorry.
No, you're right. I'd say let's take that
Give
out
us about
then.
another half hour to work on this.
We're not talking
I'm
about
not even sure why
auditoriums
home
anymore.
occupation
We moved on to home oc.
is in any of the IR zones.
It's like
No, 'cause
squatting.
they're not.
I know,
Because
I'm
they're
kinda
not
thinking the
homes.
same
Right.
thing. I'm saying take them out.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
take them out, they're
Take
just
all those out.
residential.
Yep,
And merge the two lines.
yep.
Don't steal my zoning map, those are hard to come by.
They are no longer a dime a dozen. There you go. Thank you.
All right. And now we have.
We're calling it home occupation, right? Singular.
Home occupation singular, yes. Now we're down to second residential unit changed to accessory dwelling unit. That's state law.
Right.
They added it, okay. Okay, just go back to home oc, just to tell you one thing. The reason the P was added there is because it's allowed in IR2 and IR3. Do you want to
Yeah.
remove all those Ps?
And-
Is
and
that
the-
what you're proposing?
But IR 1, 2, and 3 are not
not
places that have
residential.
homes.
So do you want to take the other Ps off, is what I'm
Yes.
saying? Did you
Yes.
already
Right.
say
I would
that?
say take all 3 Ps
Yeah,
I
off.
didn't know if you
Yeah,
had
agreed,
said
yeah.
that or not. Okay,
Yep.
Okay.
thanks, sorry.
I didn't hear him say it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Now,
clarification. It's good.
yeah,
It's good to hear it more than once.
a little farther down, where
I'm on
it's,
slow speed right now.
where it says accessory dwelling unit, that name change is state law.
Yes.
But there's changing CUP to P in the A zone. Actually, accessory dwelling units are permitted by right in any zone.
True.
Isn't that what the state law says now?
Right.
No,
It's
we
any zone, it's
still
only
have,
residential.
we still have, within residential, no, but within other zones, we still have regulatory components over that, but within
Okay.
single family.
Well,
no.
this is, it's not permitted in RS. But that is a residential zone.
And that's okay. And that's okay. Right, it's a special district, that's okay. We're okay there. But the CUP, we cannot, it can't do that. We can't have conditional discretionary review through accessory dwelling unit provisions.
So are you suggesting we?
So we're-
Oh, you're suggesting we make it a P.
I'm suggesting a
Change
P,
it
we could
from
just as
CUP
easily
to
say,
P.
say no to it as well. But,
And in ag
Understand.
as well? Oh, it's in ag,
yes,
it's not in any of the other special zones. OS or IR, and that makes
no,
sense.
PL, yeah. We still have regulatory components, regulatory, what's the word I'm looking for? Regulatory guidance. We can give regulatory guidance to these types of uses for the areas outside of what's referred to as the residential piece. When you go outside of that, it becomes either you permit it or you just don't allow it. You can't do a conditional use permit. That's what I'm getting at with this. If you change, we have to change it away from a conditional use permit within the A.
Okay.
So the lesser of that is permitted.
Now, let's look at the line right below that. Says single-family dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
Currently not permitted in the ag zone, but an ADU is permitted in the ag zone.
Wait a minute. We had that project, it's conceptual.
Yes, we did.
House in the ag, so, that is currently not permitted?
Well, you can have a house if you have farmland, right, as long as.
Yeah, there's a larger discussion with that. I don't want to get into the
Okay,
discussion
that's
of that
fine,
right
that's
now.
fine. Okay, so that
But
may be
should-
something that
that's
needs
what-
clarified.
The
That's
reason
what
I
we're
mention
looking
it
at
is,
here.
should we change the line that says single-family housing to say P in the ag zone? If you own a 20-acre ranch or an orchard,
Well, we don't have.
are you
any
not
of those,
allowed
do
to,
we?
are you not allowed to
That's
put?
all
There's
we
not a
have
lot
for
of
ag is
agricultural-
that. That's it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of agricultural areas. You have a little bit to the north, which is where that daily site was at, and then to the
Actually, there's
east, if
some
I
right
recall
here.
correctly.
So is the
There's some
reason,
right
that
here,
east-
just to the east
Eastern
Of-
edge,
of Gridley Road.
Gridley, and then there's some to the northeast as
Oh, it
well?
is on Gridley, you're right.
Is that what are all three of those
East of
dark enough
It's
green?
east of Gridley.
Yeah, east
That,
of Gridley.
that green and
Yeah,
that green.
That's it.
Right.
I mean, we need to be protective of our.
Or is this
ag-
green
No, I
also?
think that's different.
Okay,
Is that a different green?
Yeah, the IR3.
that's IR3, okay.
So is the
Don't
reason,
be colorblind when you're.
Well, that's Crotona, and that's IR3, I
yeah.
guess, because
Yeah.
it's institutional.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
So is the reason that the ADU is permitted in ag simply because of the state law? And the single-family dwelling isn't, because we have jurisdiction and we don't
Well,
want
you
them?
can't have a single-family dwelling.
Well, that's the issue, because we can't have the ADU without having
A single-family.
a single
Right.
family.
But we're wanting,
Currently, it's not permitted, so.
so are we gonna
do we
take that
permit
P
it
away?
Because,
Well, it's either gotta be P or it's gotta be the line.
So.
And I think,
but if the single-family dwelling is not permitted,
How-
then you can't have an
Then we
accessory
can't-
dwelling
Right.
unit.
So why are we permitting an
That's
ADU?
ancillary to a primary residence.
Right,
Let
so
me-
why
let
are we
me-
permitting the ADU
Two
in there?
rows above though, residential.
Well, here's my thought process with this, in terms of how I've been looking at this. If you look above at the home occupation, that we just spoke about, in the A, it's a permitted use. It's very confusing that you would allow home occupation as a permitted use within the ag zone, but then not allow for a single-family
Well,
home.
because an ag zone can have like, what do they call it, like a barn building, and you can do it in there. People
Okay.
do have, because people have that kind of license, you know, to make jam or something with the stuff.
Oh,
that's
you're
on-
saying it'd be like
Yeah, I mean.
not manufacturing, but
A
just
home
below.
It's like a
occupation
home
unit,
You're
occupation.
doing a
accessory
like
building,
cottage,
sort
they
of.
It's
call it
cottage
cottage.
style, yeah,
Cottage
exactly.
street, right.
But what about the line below it where it says residential accessory uses and structures is permitted in ag?
residential unit.
Accessory.
Residential
Accessory use.
accessory uses and structures is a permitted use.
Residential accessory uses and structures, that could be your barn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I'm
it's still-
more okay with that than,
It still doesn't make sense to me that we're permitting in any fashion an ADU in the ag zone without permitting a primary residence.
Well, you can have a residence, can you? Can't you?
So there, I don't wanna get
I
into
think
the,
this is something that you guys need to
Work on,
work on and come back.
come back with something.
Yeah.
okay, let me,
You know,
I don't wanna get into the discussion. Okay, thank you.
And we don't,
I
and
just
we don't
think we
wanna
need
get
to
into
be
the discussion
protective.
because we're talking about 1440 daily.
exactly.
Yeah, we
should
can't-
be
we
talking
can't do
about the
that.
principle.
Exactly,
Correct.
we've got some
Without
limited
using
areas
specific
that are
examples.
ag.
We have two ag areas. There's this one way over in the
Yeah.
east side of the
Right.
city.
It's covering multiple properties, they're not just one property we're talking about.
Correct.
And we're talking about it in concept, in terms of appropriate land use, and I
don't know
I would.
If there's any houses there, even.
here?
But if somebody wanted to build a house there, should we allow it? I
Right.
would
I
think
just
yes.
At this point, I would fall on the side of being protective of what we've got with ag land.
Which is
I mean,
not much.
Which is not much, and I think we should be protective of it. We can always change it in the future, or if we get more clarification from staff, about what's
I'm good
appropriate.
with that,
I
yeah.
think it's a little premature right now.
Yeah, I'm good with
Are
that.
you saying then if a certain parcel is ag zoned, we should not permit a residence on it?
I'm just-
Perhaps.
We
I-
should say
perhaps-
CUP.
Perhaps, and I.
Well, perhaps comes to CUP then.
We
rather
need,
than
Well, that might
we
permitted.
need
be-
more
that's-
information,
I
I
agree, I
think.
think it's just a little premature. Go talk
We're
and do
asking
whatever
for
you
more
guys need to do
information.
to come back with a more, with better insight and clarity.
Yeah, let me do a little bit of soul searching here from the use
Yeah.
chart.
Yeah,
Okay.
for me, it would have, and I know we're gonna move on, but my weigh in on it is if it's still gonna be used for ag and the orchards or whatever are still there, then I would say, yeah, you wanna build a home there and live there, cause you wanna, you've been living.
My family down in Simi had a house on an acre of oranges.
Right, but some developers
common
wanna
around-
come into the ag land and
And
the orchard
convert it.
goes away and
Yeah.
it converts to a residential,
Is that really what we want?
and that's
don't-
not what I want.
We have
Well,
very little ag land.
I know, and we
So-
don't have to allow that to happen, is what
Right.
I'm trying to say.
Right.
Then you make it a CUP.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
The protection of that is through the CUP process, to discretionary you can add conditions that then put that,
Yeah,
put the,
agreed.
okay.
I would be okay with that.
Let me go back and do a little research. And
Okay.
if there's something else that says that's leaning towards P, I'll have something for you. But if the stars align, we'll
I
see
would
what
kind
that.
of lean toward single-family residence on ag land is a CUP, and then it's, the ADU is permitted if the single-family residence is permitted,
Mhm.
because that's state law.
Right. Right.
And that could be farm worker housing.
Whatever.
Right, but it
Farm
allows
worker
for that.
housing wouldn't necessarily be
absolutely.
single-family, but
Right, the 80, yeah. Allows for that extra.
we do have farm worker housing in there, and that's available on ag land and open space by CUP. And that seems reasonable.
That seems reasonable, because that's part of what is needed to maintain an ag
Right.
operation.
Right,
So, yeah.
Okay,
caretaker.
so you're gonna go ponder that, Lucas.
So is a farm work, here's a rabbit hole. So is a farm worker housing separate from an ADU? Or is the farm worker housing an
Well,
Farm
if
ADU?
worker
there's
housing
farm worker
could
housing,
be-
if there's no residence, primary residence.
That could
there's
be a
no
primary
ADU.
residence for the farm workers, but there wouldn't necessarily have the owner have a house there.
Okay, got it.
It was a shallow rabbit hole.
Good.
But a rabbit hole nonetheless.
We grabbed your foot
Yes.
before you went down it.
Get another one.
Okay.
Okay, then we got short-term transient and vacation rentals.
Good chart. per-
Now in the code, now in the table.
Yes.
It's already in the code.
Yeah.
Correct. Now we're adding it
Just
to the
makes it
table.
better
It's really to
to have it in the
strengthen
table.
what we already have in there.
Okay. We'll go on to, I think it's page 4.
Restaurants,
Ooh, a quadruple.
restaurant accessory, restaurant cafe,
Ooh.
restaurant cafe outdoor.
Yeah, we thought outdoor dining, private and outdoor dining, public right-of-way should be two separate categories. Right now, when you see outdoor dining, it's,
But it's all CUP, so.
Wait, are we on page, what page are we on?
we're on page 4 now.
Is it 4 or is it
Here.
3?
Oh, is it 3? Okay.
Page 3.
It's this
There's,
stuff right here.
there's 5 purple lines, blue lines.
5 purple lines altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. After this, can we go back to page 2 for one question?
Okay?
I'd rather go to 2 first.
This restaurant component is pretty
Okay.
beefy. It's, yeah.
Okay, you'll have to refresh my memory, but, so the alcoholic beverage sales,
What's restaurant accessory?
Wait, we're going.
We'll come back to that.
We're going
Going
back.
backward?
We're going back to page 2 just for a moment. Because
just for a moment.
those types of questions are leading us down rabbit holes.
Didn't we do page 2 a few
Um,
times?
We did.
There's a brief question.
All right.
What's the, okay, remind me, what's on-site alcoholic beverage sales? That's where you, is that the grocery store thing, or is that,
On-site is on-site consumption.
okay, restaurants?
Right.
And so why did we decide to leave C1 a P?
No, I actually changed that.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I meant to
Okay,
note that here tonight.
okay,
That was something afterwards, looking back at it.
okay.
The C1 is
discussion
now a
about a CUP.
CUP.
Correct.
Good catch.
Okay, but
My
I think
little
it,
pet
I think it
projects,
would
you
be,
know, I've got a hawk eye.
I think it would be clarifying if we said alcoholic beverage sales with on-site consumption.
On-site is
Sales,
something
comma,
that,
on-site implies the sales are on-site.
yeah, but
not
it's
the
using the,
consumption.
It is a specific meaning though, right?
yeah, because it's using ABC's regulatory components
Right,
for,
that's
for
how they
their,
call it,
for their
right.
licensing.
Yeah,
Anybody
So
who's-
we're staying consistent with that, and
Yeah.
I would prefer
that's
that we
the
continue to
ABC
do that.
language.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
prefer that we stay with
Anybody
that
who's
so we don't
looking at
confuse
this,
it.
They're gonna know exactly what that means.
Yep, I like that lining up. Although I do appreciate
They're
the thought with that.
on-site eating and drinking,
Yeah, I
whatever they.
forget
Well,
what's it
that's
called?
restaurants and cafes,
Grocery
they have
store, where you
on-site
buy it and what- is that-
sales and
is that
consumption of
off-
Offsite.
alcohol.
It's
too.
offsite.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go to page 3 then, and the 5 purples all together. As Lucas and I talked about this, for the last 2 lines there, the outdoor dining private and outdoor dining public right-of-way, there is only one piece of the code right now that talks about outdoor dining. And I think if we go back and look at the definition, it probably states, or it may at least imply, that outdoor means outside a building, but in the public right-of-way.
Outdoor
Yes,
dining.
outdoor
is-
dining, the use of city sidewalks and public rights-of-way for the consumption of food or beverage.
But there can be also outdoor dining that's private.
Well, there should be,
I mean, there is,
There is, yeah.
there is.
yes, right over there on Montgomery. There's outdoor dining now at the hip vegan restaurant, and it's not in the public right-of-way.
Right, and Need had the same thing.
Yeah.
Where's Need?
And
It's not there
It's,
anymore.
Ojai Road.
Ah,
Steve was a great customer.
Good trick question, apparently.
turn right at the house that burned down and that isn't there anymore. Yeah, right, uh-huh, okay.
Ojai Roti is
It's,
Ojai Road.
the chicken place.
Oh, Kneed, yes, right, all right, I got you, right. Why did she have the store at all? She needs the dough, yeah.
Also,
Got it.
No Savita is another one.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot about that.
It's been a long time.
But yes, Ojai Roti has private dining
Yes.
on the patio. So-
They have
so did
dining,
Dean.
they have outdoor dining that is not in the public right of
That's
way.
correct.
Yeah.
When I
does the
got into,
West.
yeah, I got into this the first time, I said, well, what about Rainbow Market?
That's another conversation.
And because they have tables along along Matilaha.
Yes,
Yeah.
so does
And I think,
right on the street.
Yeah, right.
but
So does
Azu
Pub.
has an
Restaurant has
So
Azu
does
has
the
an
pub,
outdoor
the
dining
East End
permit.
Pub.
Rainbow Market does not.
Oh.
And so I asked the question, and I think the answer I got back was that part of that sidewalk along Matilaha is public right-of-way, and part of it is private property.
Um,
And if it's private property, they don't need an outdoor dining permit.
Correct.
And I think that's perfectly proper. But I think we needed to say so in the land use.
Yeah, I guess.
I also think that when we get to it in another part of Title 10 cleanup, we need to do something about parking requirements.
I totally agree with
Because
that.
right now, outdoor dining carries no parking requirement, and that is crazy.
It is crazy.
The reason for it was to encourage a
Yes, but now we've
lively
encouraged it
downtown.
to the
Yeah.
kind of
Yes.
saturation. But
But the
Not that
Hip
it's not
Vegan
great,
Restaurant
not that the
doubled
outdoor
the
dining
size
is
of their
great.
dining area without adding any parking requirement.
Our code says a minor CUP, so should we change it to an MUP,
Wait, where's this at? For which one?
outdoor dining?
Well, we've added lots of dining
All of
without
our-
parking in
our-
town.
Our actual code
yeah,
states
but
outdoor
Uh,
dining
I
is
think it's a
minor.
problem
We did,
now.
we did
It's got to
once
be a problem.
for the Topa,
Yeah, and-
Topa
Well,
Brewery.
and
Vegan, the HIP, got to add their outdoor dining with,
Right, but that was in the code that outdoor dining didn't carry a parking requirement. Yes,
right.
right. And so that question never came up
And
for
that,
us,
that outdoor dining is probably at least twice as big as,
the indoor.
Indoor.
Yeah,
but they had to park the indoor. So,
okay.
anyway,
Anyway, are we agreed that private and public right-of-way outdoor dining should be permitted differently?
no. I would say that
We
it's the
do it
same.
all
No,
together.
permitted.
No.
Parking requirements aside, that's a different part of the code.
What are we doing for restaurants? Oh, we're permitting restaurants?
I'm looking at the last two of those 5
Well, I'm just
lines.
saying it should be, to
Well,
me,
it's
outdoor, whether it's
CUP.
indoor or outdoor, it should be the
It's all
same.
CUP, it is CUP, it's already in there as CUP.
Public or
The last
private?
two lines.
I'm looking at restaurant, cafe is all
Seen
permitted.
MEP.
Oh, it's in the regular CUP section.
What?
Under, oh, I was telling.
But the outdoor part is
Yeah,
CUP.
there's,
I don't see a difference in whether,
I'm gonna play chair for a minute, there's a lot of cross-talking.
Yeah.
So let's focus in on one subject.
Let's just look at the outdoor dining for the
okay,
moment.
outdoor dining, okay.
All right.
Now, does it, it should not matter to parking requirements whether the outdoor dining is in the public right-of-way or the private, but that's not part of our discussion tonight. We're
Right.
just talking about land use.
I get it, I know.
And if we say that private outdoor dining is not allowed, what if you have?
No, I'm not saying it shouldn't be allowed, I'm saying it should be a CUP. Because.
It is.
It is, that's
It already
the-
is.
Yeah, it's
No,
red and
but
underlined.
The private isn't, the private is.
Yes, it is.
What?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Wait.
all
Oh, I'm
CUP.
looking on the wrong sheet.
You're,
Wait a minute.
you're looking at the sheets
The
with the,
old sheet.
you're looking at the
Oh,
old- yeah.
okay.
put
No
aside
wonder.
the sheets with the holes
24.
punched in
Take
them.
that folded
my
one
notes
away.
Get your sheet together.
Oh, my gosh, okay,
Punchy anyway.
all right.
So this still says that
Okay.
CUPs are required.
Okay,
Right.
Correct.
and it should be, I don't see any difference in whether it's indoor or, I mean, private or public, honestly.
In terms of permitting it?
No, they're both consistent CUPs across the board here, but why is?
No, they're not consistent right
Well,
now.
not in zones, but they're
Not
all
in
the same.
zones, yeah, they're all CUPs, but they're not all the same.
So I'm just asking about the blanks.
Is there
here.
someplace in the code that it says MCUP,
MUPs, yeah.
MUPs? Where?
10-2403.
24, okay. And that's for what zones?
Doesn't specify a zone.
It just says,
Outdoor dining is a minor. CUP, minor. By the
And,
director,
okay,
Not the
and-
commission.
Minor conditional use permits, the director shall be the review authority for minor conditional use permits. Are you
Okay.
talking about 10-2-24-04?
In 03, it says under B,
Right, because we
following
had a whole
land use
conversation about how you
activities-
could have a cafe, but then you couldn't have an outdoor dining. I think we
approval of a
changed
minor
that.
conditional use permit, and number 5 is outdoor dining.
Right, office.
yeah,
Outdoor dining facilities.
That's why we do them as directors approvals, typically,
Alright.
unless it's with a big project, then we bring it along with it, because it's all one. project.
Outdoor dining facilities. Outdoor dining facilities. The language is
What section are you at?
a little bit inconsistent.
10-2403.
So it's not a definition, it's actually within our, within the zoning regulations themselves, under the conditional use permit, Article 24. So Article 24 also has standards applicable to minor conditional use permits.
and it says outdoor dining is one of those, it's an
Does.
MUP?
It's the fifth one, yes.
But is that for all outdoor dining, or does it discriminate between public and private land?
No,
It doesn't distinguish between the two.
In
It
the
gives it a
definitions, it says sidewalks and public right-of-way, but in the code, it doesn't.
Or is this under applicability?
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Number B5, B and 5.
May be allowed with the approval, may be allowed. Doesn't say must, it says may be
Right.
allowed.
Even a minor conditional use permit is discretionary.
It is,
It requires specific findings.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
That's the may
And who's
versus,
the decision maker?
the
that
director,
would be
The
me,
director.
in a hearing,
manager.
in a hearing.
I think it's Joe. I think Joe is the,
It would be, actually, I think it would be Joe at this point,
yeah, he's the CDD and assistant city
Oh, okay,
manager.
okay.
right?
And it can always be referred
Yeah,
You do some of those other.
Or appealed.
or-
All these actions are appealable.
yeah. But I'm still wondering why in the BP zone, for example, a restaurant or cafe is allowed as a P, but the outdoor dining in public right-of-way is not allowed.
Do we define restaurant cafe in here? That,
Well, I'm pretty sure that would be in the definitions.
so restaurant is, but I don't see restaurant cafe as.
All we have is restaurant in the definitions. We don't
Yeah,
have.
a cafe is like a restaurant but smaller.
I wonder if cafe is just, do we have a definition just for cafe?
No, cafe is not in there.
No.
It may be helpful to have that, to give a little bit of distinction between
Yeah,
what a
there-
restaurant cafe means, right, versus the rest of these four categories that we have.
Well, is there an actual,
There's restaurant cafe, and there's restaurant accessory.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
but is
A
there?
restaurant accessory would be a restaurant, but it's incidental to the main purpose of the operation.
So
For
if,
example, Boku sells superfood, but they could have a restaurant, or they could apply to have a restaurant in that little six-sided building there that they have with the windows for people to eat their superfood there, not just buy it in bags and take it home.
Or they could have a restaurant cafe, which, when I'm thinking of a restaurant cafe, I'm thinking of a coffee shop, right, that may have prepackaged food.
Maybe,
it's-
but we don't
Get
have a
in- then you get
definition.
into
you're
delicatessen.
calling that a
That's-
restaurant and cafe or
That's the
a
issue.
cafe?
The
What if the
last-
cafe has to do with size and square footage and not of
The last sentence
use?
in restaurant says also includes coffee houses.
Where's that?
So
at?
they're one and the same.
Under
They're one
the-
and the same.
Under
I don't
restaurant.
really see
Yeah, they're the
a
same.
difference. There's too much.
Want to just get rid
too
of
much
cafe, that's,
crossover. I mean, I'm happy using both words, but I still can't even find the definition of restaurant here. What page is
Page
Yeah.
22,
I mean, typically a cafe might be more casual
number 6.
than a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
Number 6.
Maybe a cafe is where you order at the register and you're not sitting down with a waitress, so,
No,
it ends up being
restaurant
like-
already
So-
described.
Takeout type of,
well, that would make the Love Cafe, a cafe, not a restaurant, because you order your coffee, you order from their menu, and then they bring it to you, but you
does that
order at
make,
the.
does that
they
make
order at the
Starbucks a
register.
cafe instead of a restaurant, even though they sell food as well as coffee and tea?
It might, but coffee
Cafe
house is
usually
coffee
really
house is
certain-
listed here. I'm just saying, we don't know the
That's right,
definition
the
of
code says
cafe,
coffee
but
house is a
the
restaurant.
distinction might be how you order your food.
But that's also in restaurant.
But I don't
It says you can walk
Then
up and
what's,
order it
what
at a
difference
counter.
does
That's
it
the-
make?
that's
It
the
doesn't,
story.
I don't
Okay.
see a lot
Would
of.
it doesn't
another
make any
city-
difference.
All right.
Would another
Sherry,
city
yeah.
have a definition? or
Sherry has
something?
pointed out that the definition of restaurant is pretty broad, and it
Yeah.
includes ordering at the counter.
Yeah. So you
Okay,
could
so
just,
we may not need cafe, though,
You could-
under
or you
cafe,
could add restaurant, cafe.
restaurant/cafe.
there's all sorts of
Well,
permitted.
we could add it, we could leave it in, but we should define it if we're gonna leave
That's
it
what I
in.
said, we could add cafe to the restaurant/cafe or something like that.
Oh, in
Okay,
the
so that
definition
makes-
In
section?
the definition.
That makes me question why under restaurant cafe, the permissions are totally different. than
Different
under
from restaurant.
And accessory. They're totally different.
I mean, sometimes you want to differentiate between a takeout place and a full-fledged restaurant. but
Right.
I
I think
don't even-
size
I
has
don't-
something to do with it as
Restaurant
well.
accessory
Someone spoke to
is
that earlier.
permitted.
It tends
I
to
don't
be a
think- oh,
smaller,
Yeah.
when you're thinking of that, it tends to have a smaller, intimate kind of feel to it, right?
And the
But I don't know,
restaurant
for Ojai, I
accessory
don't know
looks
that-
like it's permitted, say,
need to.
like, in a use, like where the inn is.
The size?
Restaurant
No, the different-
accessory
I'm
would be
trying to
permitted at the
differentiate.
high school as
Yeah.
well as at the
Slicing it,
inn.
slicing it
Right.
too thin, you think?
And that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we need to figure out what a cafe is, because the permissions are completely different.
From restaurant to
on this
restaurant
chart.
cafe, yes,
Restaurant
they are.
cafe permissions are
oh.
in C1, BP, VMU, M1, MPD, whereas,
What is
whereas restaurant isn't in those zones, but they're
But
in the
it's-
other zones.
It's in other zones by
So-
CUP.
There's a reason for that, I think, and I
Here.
think it's because we don't know what a cafe is.
Well, I think it just is something that happened over
So
time.
research.
Yeah, I think we just have restaurant cafe, and we take that
And
restaurant line
cafe,
out.
yeah,
If
should
we're,
be,
if we're gonna leave cafe in, and we think it's different from a restaurant,
It's not.
then why bother? A
Might be.
cafe is a kind of restaurant.
Smaller
A coffee
restaurant.
house
It's a smaller
by
restaurant, but
code.
it's a restaurant.
it's a restaurant, it has, yeah.
Do we want to even?
I could come back with some, it may help, this water feels a little bit murky, right? And maybe some definitions could help clear that
Yeah.
up, or at least,
Some other
pulling
cities have
some of this-
defined restaurants and cafes
Mhm.
differently.
Let me look at some other cities and see,
And,
see
and
what
while
they've
you
got.
do that, let's look at delicatessen at the same time.
Well, you and I talked about that.
Yeah,
That's an,
Oh, is
because
that-
delicatessen,
is
that's
that-
an ethnic
You can-
distinction.
well,
That's still in the list?
It is.
it is, oh,
about
yes.
It's on the same page.
It's third
up
line,
higher.
third line down on that same page.
Oh, really? Oh, yes, it is. Look
It
at that.
is.
There's a
Oh, we
delicatessen.
decided, yeah, because
And
we
those
were just
permissions
trying
are
to-
different again.
I mean, I remember leaving it in because.
Okay, this is a deep rabbit hole of semantics, so.
Yeah,
Well, most restaurants and
Wrestled with that
cafes
the other day.
don't sell sliced meat and sliced cheese by the
Right.
pound.
right.
Correct.
And a deli is more of a pickup kind of a place. You go in, you buy.
Most
Like
often.
a grocery store,
Yeah.
might have a few tables.
Except Marche Gourmet.
They only have a few tables.
But you can order at the
7.
counter and sit down at the table and eat.
They have 7 tables,
Who has them?
Marche Gourmet.
That's the one over next to the Playhouse?
Did I say it right?
What are they?
They're delicatessen.
That's the place next to the Playhouse,
I know.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
they're a deli,
Kind of a deli.
but they have
cafe.
7
All right,
tables.
well, we'll do
And you order at
delis.
the register.
Yeah.
All right, we'll
So
leave
they're a
delis.
Deli cafe.
Deli cafe, yeah.
Let me see if we can find a definition for
Wonder
that
if we
one as
need the
well.
word cafe. But if you can
He's
find,
See
gonna
if we
come
have some
back.
there are
definitions out
places
there
that
that we
define
can.
it differently.
Maybe I'll
from
come up with a couple
restaurant.
different definitions that we can toy around with.
Yeah. Okay.
Chew the-
Did
chew
we
the
ever
fat, if you will.
resolve the outdoor dining exclusive of the parking requirement?
We said put them together and make it a CUP.
Make it the same.
Oh, is that what we, okay.
That's what I would do.
Any outdoor dining? Then let's say,
The only difference is Public Works charges for the ones that are in the private right of way, they have
That's
encroachment,
right.
annual encroachment.
That's right,
permits.
yeah.
yes,
But as far as the outdoor dining permit part, the minor CUP part, that's both.
okay, but right now, the CUPs are not the same.
No.
Public right-of-way is only in C1 and VMU, and private is also in BP, M1, and MPD,
I mean, it's.
which are places where restaurants are allowed.
Yeah, I mean, just, it should all just. be-
Right.
I
should
don't-
all be
I
the
don't
s-
know
It should
why-
be the same.
The public and private outdoor dining
that should-
allowances are different.
It should be the same.
Yeah, agreed, same.
Then this is just the 5 columns in the center, that's table 2-4. Shall we just make it, and you said it was a minor CUP?
Yeah, for the code,
Now, for outdoor dining,
yeah.
Correct.
For any sort of outdoor dining.
I mean, my preference would be for restaurants and outdoor dining to be CUPs. But at the very least, if restaurants are permitted, then
It's crazy not,
crazy not to have a minor MUP.
If it's associated with a large project, with remodeling and doing the whole big thing, it goes as a CUP definition along with the DRP.
Does?
The outdoor dining has.
Oh, now.
It doesn't go as a
But if it's
minor
just something
CUP?
adding on, like Jim and Rob's, they wanted to do that, or the director just, they wanted to add that little element, and the director.
So you're saying an established use,
Restaurant adding.
and then
outdoor
adding an
We would be
outdoor,
looking at it as a CUP.
No.
it'd be a minor
No,
CUP.
it's,
MUP.
and it's done by the director.
So it would
by
be
the
a-
director.
an established
Restaurant, and they
use.
decide they wanna put tables outside on the side and do outdoor dining.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Then
well,
that's
So
Yeah,
you're
so-
saying there should be a category that says outdoor dining existing facility and outdoor dining new?
Brings up your parking issue.
I see a scale issue here,
Yeah.
because outdoor dining with HIP, as much as I love it, that's big scale, and that the outdoor dining is bigger than the restaurant. Somebody putting out a couple of tables on the sidewalk, that's a whole different game. And that, a few tables on the sidewalk, MUP, and maybe we could look at, numbers of tables or
But-
something like
I,
that.
But
I can
didn't
tell
HIP
you,
have to have parking for their indoor dining?
What's that?
They had to
Yes.
have parking for their indoor
Yeah.
dining.
Indoor dining, but not for
But
the outdoor, but
If
that's
you
a
look at,
separate issue. to
I mean,
pull out.
technically, yeah, it could work differently, but the reality of it is, when it's nice out, nobody's inside. Those people are actually sitting outside.
Well, that's.
I think that's
Problem with
maybe
that
why it evolved that way, because typically, if it's nice out, nobody's sitting inside.
But I'm talking about the difference, maybe I agree, a couple of tables on the sidewalk, MUP, fine. But there's gotta be a point at which I think maybe it warrants a CUP, like we've already got in the code.
you're talking a Mason-Dixon line for maybe the number of seats or tables or
Some number of seats.
combination of their square footage,
Or-
something.
Or
Proportion
the number of seats compared to the number of indoor
Yeah.
seats.
Hmm.
Right, a
I've,
certain amount of expansion.
I've seen it a bunch of different ways in
Yeah,
a bunch of different cities.
Okay,
I can bring back some examples
Okay,
Okay.
of
That'd
that.
be great.
that's, yeah.
Thanks.
but now we're back to the question of, should private and public right-of-way outdoor dining be treated differently?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so either. I see the same.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Potential impacts and operational characteristics are,
It's just,
Same.
yeah, the only difference is whether they
No.
pay public works
Yeah.
or they
Well,
don't.
it's whether they're encroaching on the public right-of-way.
well, I think we want to make sure
Like
they're
the
not.
Ojai Roasting Company has tables out front, and if people are there, and they have dogs, and they have bicycles, it becomes difficult to get by that
As
place.
is the same, but it's
Yeah, so
been
they
that
need
way
review.
since time immemorial.
And
Yeah,
that's
but
why they have outdoor dining permits, because they're encroaching on the public right-of-way. But somebody.
But we're not, yes, that's
but
fine.
hip vegan parking requirements aside, is not encroaching.
But that doesn't affect where they can be. That just affects whether they need that other kind of permit from the Public Works Department, which is not on here.
HIP doesn't require an encroachment permit,
No, because they're private.
right? So aren't we treating it differently? And
Well, yeah,
shouldn't
but
we
it's
list it
not,
differently?
that's not listed on here. Isn't that separate? That's a separate thing. This is
That's
a.
outdoor
this is a-
dining private.
But
Yeah,
there's-
that's
but
outdoor.
there's
This
places
is
where
whether you can have it in that zone or not on this chart. It's not saying whether you have to get, if it's private, obviously you have to, it's written somewhere, Sherry will tell you where, that they need permission from the Public Works Department. But all we're saying is
That could
here,
be a note over here on the
is-
right-hand side, requires encroachment permit.
yeah.
Or it
Well,
lists
there's
the
enough-
specific code section.
There's enough places that have some tables, they kind of start pushing out into the walkway, whether they start on private or whether they move into public. It just seems like they should all be reviewed under the same kind of permit, that's all.
Right.
And I would agree with what I think you said earlier, and
They're
that
not
is,
permitted.
wherever a restaurant or cafe is permitted, outdoor dining should be permitted with conditions.
Well, I think
We couldn't have a zone where you're allowed to have a restaurant.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to have
Well-
outdoor dining under any conditions. That seems crazy to me.
You're not, no, I'm not saying it should be prohibited, but I mean, I don't know.
But we have
that
we have actually 3 zones right now where restaurants are permitted as a P,
Right,
but outdoor dining is,
is a CUP.
but
Would be.
outdoor dining in the public right-of-way is not permitted.
No,
It's a
oh,
dash.
No, if, I think this, it should all be CUP, and combined. So we end up having two rows with one row that says restaurant,
And one says outdoor
and one
dining.
says outdoor
Outdoor
dining.
dining.
And I would even be willing to consider outdoor dining needing an MUP, where sort of the run-of-the-mill stuff is taken care of by staff, but if there's some unusual kind of layout or. you know, they're
Density.
gonna-
Or-
Density
Or
or.
quantity.
Quantity or something, kick it up to planning commission, and that would be.
Now, does the definition of MUP, besides leaving discretion on an MUP to the director, does it also say the director can choose to push it to the commission?
Oh, he can always do that.
Oh, okay.
If he's not comfortable with something.
But there's, but then, but then the Public Works,
No, that's,
that's a separate thing.
that's the permit
Yes.
process, not the permission process.
Okay, well, that's what we're saying, I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I think.
Okay,
I mean, I agree, there's plenty of situations like,
We've had a lot lately where people ask
They
to
just-
do something, and Luke
the
says-
pub maybe, or
It,
out
it
there.
can be a
in Easton.
director's decision, he says, no, I'm
Yeah.
not comfortable
No,
with
and-
that.
you know-
would need to apply for a design.
okay, that's,
I
and that's great.
appreciate- I
That's,
appreciate that, and I
that's
think
the
your
kind of
judgment has been
insight we
very
need
good.
from staff.
So, yeah.
But now let's go back to one, so, all right, so I'm okay with combining the 2 outdoor dining lines and making it everything in C1BP, VMU, M1, and MPD, where restaurants are permitted, making that an MUP. Is that, I think that's what we've agreed to.
I
But
mean,
now,
maybe we
if you
need
go back up
restaurants
to
be
the.
an MUP.
But now you go back up to the line that just says restaurant, and that has nothing
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, but we're.
in those, and it has CUPs over in other zones.
Oh,
Compare
right.
This line
We're
to
gonna
that
collapse.
line.
We're gonna collapse,
all
we're gonna
three of these.
mix, so we're gonna
Collapse
and
restaurant.
Okay.
take, and put it under restaurant cafe.
Yeah.
All right, so the stuff that's under restaurant, or that's in the restaurant line, we'll put into the restaurant cafe line?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I wonder, so
I
why-
thought, wait, I thought we, 15, 20 minutes
And we're
ago,
gonna get a definition
we
of
all
a
agreed
cafe.
that, we all agreed Luke was gonna go study some other cities and bring back definitions of what a cafe is.
Right.
Which I still am.
so
Right,
potentially we
right.
could
you,
wind up
Ray.
with
This is
one
a
line that
cafe.
says
So they
restaurant
still may
and a
be two
different line that
lines.
says cafe.
There still may be 2 lines
Right,
based on
we're aiming for one
definitions.
line, but
All right.
we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
But we'll
yeah.
combine the last 2 lines and make it MUPs
Okay.
across
That we can do.
across that
There's
table.
one other thing to consider, that most of these restaurants and outdoor dinings want alcohol to be served. And your
that
alcohol is
requires-
prohibited in most of them except CUP, so they'd have to come to you for the alcohol approval,
yeah.
which is what HIP did. They had a minor CUP through the director to have the outdoor dining. They had to come to the commission to get approval for alcohol in the VMU.
Well, the larger issue to
Okay.
consider is the restaurant use, really. That's the main use. That should need the CUP. And if they want to add entertainment, if they want to add alcohol, they want to add outdoor dining, that all should be part of the CUP. I mean, that's.
Yeah,
how
it should,
would-
I don't think it should be
much more
separate things. I
much
think it
more
should be
efficient.
one thing, and those things are
But
all,
if you're gonna have them permitted in the PL,
Yeah,
the
we need to-
IR1,
we
the
need to work
IR2,
on
the
that.
IR3, alcohol's not permitted in any of those, so they wouldn't be able to serve alcohol at those restaurants.
Right, so they would be.
Isn't the
they would
inn in
be a
one of those
restaurant that would
zones?
not serve alcohol.
The inn is IR3.
But they have alcohol.
Maybe that's the cafe definition.
They also pay 40% of the city's
Maybe
budget
I'm-
with their
So then
202.
why can't you have alcohol in the IR3 if we already have
I can't
it?
imagine why you shouldn't.
Well,
IR3, which is the inn?
Except Love Cafe.
Huh?
Well, I guess that's been violated, right?
yeah, so maybe we need to look at that
Yeah,
too.
this says alcoholic beverage sales on site is not permitted in any IR zone.
And
I-
where the,
On site.
Yeah.
I mean, that
And the
that
IR
seems a little
zone.
silly.
There's IR3. I think that's IR3, Crotona. I doubt they do a lot of
I doubt it.
on-site alcohol sales, but you know the inn does.
yeah, and then where's IR2 and IR1?
Kind of a,
IR1.
A darker tan
IR2,
color.
IR3, so light green, okay, so this stuff too.
this is IR2, that's the high school. This is IR1, that's the hospital. And that's IR1, that's two churches. Why they're not PL? Who knows?
Well, Lucas, if you, but
Well,
Suzanne,
and
our planner
we'll be
has
looking at some
mentioned
of
that all
those
cities
issues
usually
with
require
the general
CUPs for
plan,
alcohol
so
anywhere. And
that would
our
be good.
city is permitted in the commercial zone.
Well, wait a minute, I think we addressed that earlier. Alcohol beverage sales on site.
Well, they're an
It's-
allowable use in commercial, but our
Commercial,
planner said that most city, and I don't know what your experience is in most
No,
cities.
it's true. Most,
That most
every
cities
city
require
I've been in,
CUPs for
when
all
it's in the
alcohol.
commercial area, it is a CUP.
Yeah, yeah.
And we,
Yeah,
we
maybe
talked
you should
about we
consider-
talked about that an hour ago. No, it's okay.
No, but I mean, it allows you to consider how close these uses are, how many are you getting? You know, is it too much? Is it working fine?
Start looking at saturation.
And then
Yeah.
there's another
Yeah.
point, when you're doing your outdoor dining, because of the alcohol sales, you're required to do
You need the fencing and the
barriers,
barrier, yeah.
which kicks it to either a design review of some sort.
Sure. Absolutely.
Along with your minor use permit.
So I have a proposal.
Stop.
Well, maybe not entirely, but with this category, let Luke do his research.
yes,
Come
Yes.
back
Yes.
and make some
right,
recommendations,
right.
and then we can
Good.
pick it up. 'cause
Did
there's
we
a-
decide to
there's
do
a-
something with the alcohol
Just kind of
sales?
beating it to death here tonight.
Yeah, and I think Luke knows what
No, I
our
said we.
questions are
Right.
and what the discrepancies
Written them down.
are, so,
We'll come back.
Okay.
yeah.
I
let's
think that's
just
a better idea.
distill
It sounded
down.
like you were on the track of making a decision, but let's get some information before that
Yeah.
comes to fruition.
Yeah, I'd rather vet it thoroughly.
I just have one question on the, and I feel like this is another, another use that we took a vote on. Could be totally wrong. The gun shop. Why are we permitting a gun shop?
rid of the gun shops.
I thought we voted,
Not to have it.
no.
No.
It's a,
We talked about it, but we never voted to prohibit.
I
Oh,
think we
we
did.
said gun shop was part of retail trade. And so we didn't need the line in the table. Isn't that
Well,
what
we
we?
got-
We didn't want to have a gun shop as a separate category,
something
that
with-
if the hardware store had guns,
They
that
have
was
it.
one
It's a-
thing.
it's a
That was our
incidental,
discussion.
It's
That
an
was
accessory
it.
use, it's incidental.
That was
They
our
already are
discussion.
doing it, fine.
But we don't
It's
want,
not
well, we don't want any gun shops
No
in
new gun
town.
shops, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did vote on that,
Yeah, we decided it was part of retail trade
Right.
already.
right. True Value already is selling it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, fine. They,
So we just deleted the
Definitely
gun
deleted.
shop line from the table.
yeah.
Yes.
There with all the slashes.
Oh, I would,
Not allowed.
we could delete it, that would be fine, it's just.
So
not
if
fair.
another.
It's better, it's more.
If-
Let
if
me
the
bring.
Code is,
Let me bring forth a hypothetical future situation.
yes,
So, we lost Ojai surplus.
Right.
What if another surplus place wants to open up and they had a gun shop in the Ojai surplus? Would we not want to have that happen? Did you hear my hypothetical?
As
About-
I understand the
So Ojai
hypothetical,
surplus
yeah.
closed, they sold guns and
Yeah.
knives.
They
What
sold
if another
guns as well as
surplus place wanted
clothing
to
and
open up
backpacks and all sorts of
and
things.
sell firearms?
I say
Yeah.
no,
You would say no. Okay,
yeah.
But
that was my hypothetical.
would you prevent the hardware store in the Y from selling
No,
firearms if you could
No.
make it retroactive?
no, because it's been that way for years, and no, I wouldn't do that. I don't wanna see,
More.
New one.
I don't wanna see new or more, yeah, doesn't fit.
I don't see how you could say, they've been there a while, so they're allowed to do that, but you're not allowed to do
They're
that.
non-conforming.
City's allowed to do that. We could do the same
We
with
have-
alcohol licenses
we
and
have
say
no-
we've given out all the alcohol licenses we're allowing. No one else can get one.
We have
That's
non-conforming
within the
use-
city's purview.
Yeah, we have
Right.
non-conforming uses all
So-
over the place.
There was a city that I was in that we did that for beauty salons, where there was an oversaturation of beauty salons. So they capped the beauty salons, making it a non-conforming use. So all the beauty salons that were within the downtown district were allowed to remain. Those spaces were allowed to remain, but as those beauty salons left, something else had to go in, not another beauty salon.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no
But if
community
another
wants-
surplus store opened, that would not be a gun shop per se.
No.
So how do you tell them, they say, I wanna reopen the surplus store. Do you allow it?
If gun shop is left
Do
in
they-
here with
are
the
they-
lines through.
Are they allowed to reopen the surplus store without a CUP?
So if the surplus store requires a CUP, they're required to go through the CUP process. The other
Retail
aspect of that is
sales,
they would
does
identify.
retail sales require a CUP?
Retail sales require CP for, well, let's look at the use chart here.
No.
Does it require
It's gonna be permitted, the retail sales.
you have general retail,
What page are we on?
I just have general retail here as a permitted use within the C1 and VMU.
General, what page is that?
It's just above gun shop, about
Oh.
4 lines.
Oh, general retail, okay.
Yep.
So what's your
General
question?
retail.
So the question is, if they
Chair?
come in and they reopen the Ojai surplus
How do you
as
keep
a
them
general
from selling
retail store,
guns?
and they're gonna have a gun section in the store,
How do you keep them from doing that?
We can
I,
not
I
allow
don't,
it. City's allowed to.
Sure, you can keep gun shop and then have it
All lines, all the way across.
all lines all the way through.
but we agreed, I think, in the previous discussion, that gun shop was a retail establishment whose primary
yeah, we don't want that.
mechanism was selling guns.
Right.
That's why we
I know-
took
I
it
know what you're
out.
saying. I know what you're saying.
And he's saying the surplus store, new surplus
The surplus
store,
store
their
would be like the
primary
hard-
would not, it'd be like a
It
hardware
would be like the
store.
hardware store.
So the question
it's-
becomes,
That's
do you
okay?
want any more
Well,
gun sales
I would
whatsoever?
like it, but I'm not sure that we could articulate a sufficient
Right.
argument to keep
That's-
that out.
That's my feeling as
But
well.
for that reason, it would be better to leave gun shop in and just put the lines all the way across. So it's clear that it's prohibited.
I do agree, when you look at gun shop, you think that's the primary use, not something ancillary to what
Yeah.
the other,
The different-
whatever that
Yeah.
main use is.
But is the opposition to having a gun shop an opposition to guns in general?
Yes,
Is that,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Making it widely available and,
Is it-
making,
is it-
increasing the
is it not
availability.
widely available in the hardware
So
store?
if you have gun shop on a line in there, and it's, and it's not permitted anywhere, and somebody wants to reopen Ojai surplus and sell guns, is that not
That's-
permitted then?
I see I would look at this and say gun shop as a primary
Yeah,
use,
agreed.
not as an accessory. If you put gun shop accessory to, that changes the game.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, think about that. I mean, in terms of what's.
So you want primary or
I would be
accessory
opposed
use
to
is
saying
permitted.
gun sales accessory not permitted anywhere. I
Right.
would be opposed.
Even though we've already got 2 stores that are, we have
Do we
lots of,
have
it's
2
enough.
stores?
Yeah,
We
hardware
have
store.
one
That's
right
enough.
now.
2 stores is enough.
oh, we only have 1 now? Because the gun.
'Cause the
surplus
surplus
was
store
the other
closed.
one.
Closed.
That was it.
Yeah, and they sold a lot of handguns where I think the hardware store
Yeah.
sells mostly hunting rifles,
I
right?
think-
Not as
I
many
think you're right.
handguns.
I think you're right.
So it's just whether we want to sell handguns in city limits or
I mean,
not.
No.
like,
I mean,
really?
yeah, we don't need them. I hear you.
I
But
can't-
is it a person's, right to buy a
No,
handgun?
it's not,
and-
but they have plenty of opportunity to
There's
buy a gun.
tons.
Anybody who
There's
wants to buy a
tons.
gun can
You go
find
to
a place, an
Ventura.
outlet.
Yeah,
But the
there's
outlet,
plenty in
the new
Ventura.
outlet for guns does not need to be in Ojai, so.
Uh-huh.
That's
You
my-
know, exactly the
that's my
same
position.
words were used in discussing marijuana dispensaries,
You know,
and it did not fly.
well,
It's not killing people
it's not, yeah,
in schools.
I'm not sure.
You can be
Marijuana?
sure.
yeah, I know.
Oh,
that's-
now we're going down a rabbit hole.
I don't know that I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Actually, a bear cave, not even a rabbit hole.
Well, I'm just stating my position, so.
Fair enough.
And it's that the will.
So you're
me-
voting to keep gunshot and have lines all the way across, or take it out altogether?
No, I think
Where
it's
are we
more
at?
clear that it's prohibited, and Sherry was clarifying this for me. It's clear that it's prohibited if it's in, and
As
there's,
a primary
and
function
there's lines
of a
all the way
retail
across.
outlet.
And what about gun shop accessory?
That would be very clear if it were
Right.
added, and there were lines all the way across. But there's disagreement on the commission about, the support for that. So, I mean, I'm aligned with you on that. I would be happy to add gun shop and accessory, or however you want to
Yes,
state
for
it.
both.
Okay.
But that's probably a future discussion to come back to when you redo the table.
Political discussion.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
It's establishing a vision for the community. It's thinking about
It is.
how do we view our community and our downtown? How do we want it to grow? So that's all.
All right. Let's see.
farther down that page, child
We're almost done.
daycare, we have 3 lines that have to do with daycare. One now has child deleted, and it's just daycare. That could be senior daycare.
Right, so that was something we had discussed
Yeah. we did.
previous.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think we agreed that should be by CUP.
Right.
So do we need to define that more and say senior daycare, or just leave it ambiguous as daycare?
Daycare would be either child or senior.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with that. I think
Okay.
that's appropriate.
Now we've got, we did a hotel motel timeshare already, didn't we?
We did have that discussion.
Okay, on to the last page.
Public utility facility.
The public utility facility, was that?
Public safety, public utility facility.
Bar accessory, alcohol thing.
Am I looking at the?
Where did
Bar
you see that?
accessories.
Bar accessory, it's allowed in the IR zones.
Where is that at?
Under services,
Bar accessory, that goes with the accessory restaurant, I would think.
We're waiting,
we're getting
more information. What, there's another line?
It's in line, it's in table, page 3,
It's allowed at the.
right
high
after banks
it's
and
allowed at the
financial
high
services.
school.
Bar accessory.
Is that true?
It's permitted,
Now, think about it. what's,
Permitted in the IR zones where you can't have alcohol.
Yeah. That's why I say just take the line. That's a good point.
Guess we're taking that out.
Let's take that line out.
Yeah, I don't see it being very useful. Yeah. I'm losing my pen.
Okay, and then we're down to public utility facility.
That was in my drawer.
That's where Souza sits.
okay.
We just have a few changes here then. On the last page, a couple of CUPs added for ag and OS for public utility facility.
Yeah,
I don't remember, Lucas, what you had in mind there. I don't remember discussing that line with you.
I think that was a carryover from our previous meeting. I'm just looking to see if we already have that. And give me one moment here.
Well, you've added it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a change. Make sure it's not public services. Okay. Now let me look at this.
But this public utility facility is not the same thing as a wireless telecommunications facility.
No.
That's a different line farther down the table.
Totally different.
So it's some other sort of utility.
Well, I just read the definition. It's.
That's like the power substation down here on the trail?
Yep, and maintenance yards and natural gas distribution facilities and public water system wells and treatment plants and storage and telephone switching facilities, which we don't really, well, maybe we have. I guess we do.
We do, right on the corner of Ojai Avenue and Blanche, that AT&T building.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So
And how is that
we
zoned?
had made that determination had been made at a previous meeting where I'm seeing notes identifying CUP for both A and OS.
Public utilities.
Oh, that was in a previous meeting, we discussed that,
Wonder what
okay.
Correct.
the,
Because that
Thinking
AT&T
was-
property
I don't remember.
is one of several parcels there on Ojai Avenue between Blanche and Kenyatta that is C1. But public utility facility is not permitted in C1, so I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, but that's what okay, but that's the definition. I mean, that would go under this
I mean,
public
I don't-
utility facility if it's.
Yeah.
Whether, and so it needs to be identified in C1 then, I guess, unless we don't want it
And,
in any
well-
other C1 places, because we're
Or,
looking to
or
the
if,
future.
if we remain silent on it, or, well, we're saying it's not permitted in C1, but the one that exists is permitted.
Right, so in the future, it wouldn't be.
But if somebody, but you look at the C1 zone, it runs way out to the east end.
Okay,
Right.
It runs clear to Gridley. If AT&T wanted to relocate out to Gridley,
Yeah,
would we
true.
say they're not allowed?
well, and plus, and in some of these other,
Yeah, like ag and open.
yeah, some of these other things that go under that definition, like public water system wells. If the moratorium gets lifted, let's say, and someone wants to put a well in the C1. And maintenance yards, so yeah, so something probably needs to go into C1.
And M1 and MPD, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
With a C.
that would be more appropriate for that kind of thing.
So shall we add, on that line, shall we add CUP under C1,
And,
M1 and MPD?
yeah.
Yeah,
I would say
Yeah.
yes.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
Wait, say that again? You're saying,
CUP.
The line for public utility facility
Mhm.
would be CUP under C1, M1, and MPD.
okay.
Yeah, that's.
as
good.
well as
That's
the
good.
two new
As
red
well
ones
as
in
A and OS.
And then the ones that were.
I would, could you revisit why we would consider that an A or OS?
I'll have to go back and look at the video on that one.
I just,
Yeah.
that just seems a little strange, but.
If
There
they
might
had
be a
one
good
of those
reason.
like fake trees, would that count?
Oh, that's a
as-
wireless
that?
that's wireless telecommunication.
Yeah, that's not the
facility.
same.
that put in our
That's a
open
different,
space?
that's a different line down
Then
here.
maybe we don't need that in A and OS.
That's what I-
If that's
I mean,
a,
if we allow if we allow opportunities in some of these other zones, I think we should be, again, we should be very protective of ag, open space, kinds of,
In fact, wireless telecommunications facilities, it says CUP in OS, but not in ag.
But that would disallow someone on ag land, let's say,
That would
Go
allow.
back to the well, putting in a well that, it says public well, but let's say,
like, no, it would be Casitas putting it in, wouldn't it?
right, but
Not a
put,
private well.
right, but you're saying you don't want it in ag at
Oh,
all.
I see what
And
you're
I'm
saying.
saying, what if Casitas
Oh.
approached a farmer and said, would you allow us to use your land and we'll pay X amount, we'll lease your land and sink a well on your land?
Okay.
You know?
The CUP would allow for
I thought
that.
Casitas put the wells on the land they owned.
I'm just being hypothetical for the
Yeah.
future. And our water conservation and the basin, groundwater
Well,
basin
I'm
being
not-
full all the time,
Right.
I guess I'm
as we
somewhat
rainwater
indifferent.
harvest and do the right things.
All right, so,
I'm not sure they're not on this ag land over here along Grand Avenue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
satisfied with public utilities?
Mhm.
Utility facilities? Okay. Removing CUP from A1 and OS, or A and OS, correct? Well, actually, it's already,
No, I think,
it's not there already, so just
It's-
saying
it's
don't
not-
propose it.
Not adding it.
Okay, all right, very
Okay,
good.
so you don't want to add it there, okay. Okay.
All right, and then wireless telecommunication facilities?
Wireless telecommunication facilities,
The,
telecommunications facilities,
where's that?
So they're
Oh, I
on-
we
see.
never had wireless in the table before.
Oh,
We just had telecommunication facility and facilities.
So is
But
there,
what was really meant by that, I think if you look at 1714, 10-2.1714,
yep,
that is wireless telecommunications facility. And you're taking it out of all the residential zones. That was the proposal, to take cell towers out of all residential zones.
So is that the definition, the cell tower? Because there's no, it's not in our definitions, a wireless.
there's
tower.
wireless telecommunication facility, and
It's not
the-
in our definitions.
you know what's interesting is it might actually be in its own section defined. Let's look real quick.
Telecommunications facilities
That's
is
there.
on page 28.
Right, but under W, there's no wireless.
But it says public, commercial, and private electromagnetic and photoelectric transmission, broadcast repeater receiver stations, and wireless communications, including commercial earth stations, includes antennas, commercial satellite dish antenna equipment building.
Okay, so maybe we add the word wireless to that definition, telecommunications
in the name of it.
facilities.
But not all of these are wireless.
Right, we can say including wireless or
Yes.
something, just to bring that line in somewhere.
Right. Can we do that, Lucas? Add the inclusion of wireless into telecommunications facilities. Then down here, we don't have to say wireless, we can still just say telecommunications facilities. But do we take it out of all the residential zones?
I would recommend yes.
Yeah, I would too, yeah. I think.
It
So,
supports the 5G ban that, the city's wanting to make the strictest 5G
When AT&T wanted a 4G, they went outside the city for it.
Right. So we're trying to put in the most stringent restrictions for 5G, and that would support that and
That's fine.
support the city attorney in his efforts.
But that says we could have it in PL and OS. It's proposed to add it by CUP to PL and OS and take it out of all residential areas.
So if you look at wireless, the wireless communication facilities
Oh.
chapter,
I'm sorry. It was in one of those and not in the other, so you just transferred it over.
correct. So this is sometimes the frustrating thing when you have definitions in other articles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have that here. Chapter 14 of Title 10 has a definition for wireless communication facilities or wireless facility or facility. Means any facility that transmits and or receives electromagnetic waves, including but not limited to commercial wireless communications, antennas, and other types of transmission equipment for the transmission.
Yeah, this could
Or
be a
receive-
microwave repeater
Or
station.
Right, so the term also means any facility or transmission equipment used to provide any FCC authorized wireless communications service, including but not limited to personal wireless services defined by the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and licensed by the FCC, including but not limited to commonly known as cellular personal communication services, specialized mobile radios, SMRs, enhanced specialized mobile radios, paging, ground-based repeaters for satellite radios, services, microcell antennas, distributed antenna systems, and similar systems. It seems all
That pretty
inclusive.
well covers the whole waterfront.
It does.
And that's in 10-14, wireless telecommunications facilities.
Correct.
So the proposal is to leave it in,
It doesn't use the word telecommunication, it just says wireless communication facility.
Right.
10-14.
I thought somebody,
Oh, I think you did take off the tele.
I thought when we talked about this, somebody said that basically everything in terms of telecommunications is wireless now, or will be in the future. Am I wrong?
But it's not
Well,
current.
no.
Not true?
No, the AT&T system over there, the AT&T building still has a huge battery bank, and if you have a landline in your house from AT&T, you still have 48 volt DC going to your house.
So I have a question, does, and maybe it's somewhere else in the chart, I'm just not seeing it. Does this include fiber optic, internet fiber optic? Under the.
I would say no, not for
Okay.
this. It would have been identified
Okay,
either.
got
within
it.
this-
So is that on this anywhere? Cause I
Fiber
know the
optics.
city's talking about.
Yeah, we
Put
need-
like
we need-
FiOS, you mean?
We need.
Yeah, the
Right.
city is talking about putting broadband fiber optics in to attract new businesses here.
Yeah, because
So
you
where
can't-
would that go if that's not communication, that's high speed?
That's communications facilities in my book.
But that's,
You would see that as communications facilities. It's a wired hard line versus a
Wired
wireless.
or wireless or fiber, it's all communications.
Yeah. So the lines,
and that's not in
That says it's in,
10.14.
that says it's involved, it's allowed in the business district.
Does that
Right,
need
so
to
that's not
get
lit-
added to the definition?
That's not listed in 10.14.
I would be careful with that
Underground
because
fiber.
right now, there's the proposal for that type of technology saying no within all the residential areas.
but laying
I-
the,
I
no, wait,
would
wait, wait,
bet-
wait, wait. Laying the lines in the street underground, that would not be anything that I would expect this to be regulating. Only, and I don't know how,
Hooking it to the houses along the street?
Yeah, the fiber optic, yeah. You know, it's like I mean, all the new communities have fiber optic, it's in the street, it's laid in its own trench,
Right.
and You know.
And that's not regulated.
Not by zoning, not like this, that's a public utility, it's a utility in the street. It's like sewer, water.
Then we're
And the
back
fiber optic
to
is
public
like-
utility facility, which is not
But that's
allowed
the-
anywhere in the
that's
residential
what I'm getting
zones.
to, yeah, so what's not allowed is, and I don't know how the fiber optic works, do they need a centralized location where
You
there's
need electronic
controls and-
repeaters and such.
And those are
The
above ground
signal only goes
structures?
so far in a fiber optic line, then you have to convert it
Beyond
back
what
to
we know.
electrons
This is all
with
assumption.
the receiver, and then hook
Let
it
me-
to a transmitter for the
But
next.
those are,
Let me
those
try
are
to,
like,
let me try to reel us in here.
okay,
I'm
sorry.
I'm appreciating the conversation. Let me go back and take a look at how we handle it currently, and if there are some sort of regulatory components that we can fold in here, or not fold in here for various reasons.
Okay,
Because there's an active conversation going on about bringing in fiber optics, so business to attract new businesses,
Yeah,
so
no,
they'll
it's
have
very-
high
it's-
speed.
It's critical for
But we need
Ojai.
to see where
Yeah.
it lands and all this.
but right now, it
I was
doesn't
just trying
appear
to
that
get
we're
it-
allowing it anywhere.
So along with, when you lay the lines in the street, I assume that, like Steve is saying, so there's places where you need your utility hut or something.
Yeah, there's boxes, and typically those can be either underground or above ground. It just
Yes,
depends on,
There are periodic non-glass fiber things
sure.
in the system.
Right,
Like a substation, like a,
right,
kind of thing, right?
right.
All right. That's,
I wouldn't, I mean,
Like the cable TV company
Ooh.
does.
yeah.
But Luke just needs
That's what you
Luke
would-
needs to research to figure out where it's gonna go.
Let's tease some of that out.
Because it's not in 10.14, so
right.
we need to see where.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we're to the end of the table then, and Luke has a lot of homework.
I know.
It is?
Okay, but broadcast facilities.
Oh, it is.
Can't broadcast studios have antennas and all kinds of stuff, real tall stuff?
Yeah.
Yes. Those are typically
why are
like
they
whip
permitted?
antennas, whip antennas, which are covered under the wireless.
It's allowed?
Yes.
We
Federal
cannot-
regulations
Okay, so,
have to
so
allow
then we
it.
should, why do we, a broadcast studio would be okay and C1? Permitted? With a big whip antenna going 100 feet up? Because they want
Oh,
to
no,
reach,
it's-
they want to reach everybody?
You don't do it that way.
Not anymore?
No. You take a little dish and you send it to some place that has a big tower and a
Okay.
lot of coverage.
She feels better now.
Well, that's what I was trying to say. I thought somebody had said in the future, everything's going to basically wireless.
Wireless. That is the
Maybe
wave,
that was the more
the wave of the
accurate
future, yes.
description.
Yeah, but that's gonna be satellites and that,
Yeah, okay.
All right.
we won't even see those.
All
All
right.
right, let's move on to item 3, director decisions. Any questions for staff?
Let's pat ourselves on the back first for that.
Take a deep breath, everyone. Take a deep breath.
Hey, Steve, thank you once again for doing all that work,
We-
really.
Had to be done.
Gargantuan, thank you, yeah.
No, that was a big job. And Lucas, thank
And
you, too.
obviously not complete because we made a lot of changes.
But that was the purpose of,
That was the
Discussion
purpose of the
tonight, yeah.
discussion.
right.
And we're not done, but Lucas will come back and give us,
Yeah, I was not
Some thoughts
intending
and
that to
some
be,
options.
that to be the final, or for us to have a final discussion. I was intending for me to go back and take a deeper dive into some of that stuff.
great.
Come back to this commission.
Okay, director's decisions,
Oops.
We have, we just have a repeated line here.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I think it's, there's
The
two-
old Valero
there's really just
station
one
that is
T.
now a Shell station.
Yeah, there's one DE, not two. They're the exact same. Right.
They're just replacing tanks. Yeah, I didn't see anything in there that I
thought was worth another deep dive. What, tell me about the miscellaneous, if you could, the last one there? Miscellaneous permit address assignment? Is that all? I happen to know Dave Meisch. He's a building contractor. And so it's his job if somebody wants a new house? Oh, okay, so he's spec building a house there?
That
Okay.
lot's vacant currently, correct?
Yeah.
Right. So all lots, they just have a parcel, they have an
So
APM
he
currently.
was just asking for an address.
Right, get the start.
Okay.
And it goes to the county, and the county will recognize it.
Got it, okay.
Right.
Tentative agenda, Title 10 cleanup. Yes. And general plan update. I'd like to hear some more about general plan update, but not tonight.
Okay. We can wait till the next meeting, that's fine.
I don't, was it on our agenda?
It was. It is. It's a standing item. I can just
It's a
go into like
continuing item.
if you don't, I can go into like a 2-minute spiel, maybe less than that.
Okay,
We're actively working with Ramey to set up the kickoff meeting, the official kickoff meeting, which sounds like it'll be a week from this Friday, which will officially kick everything off. In addition to that, we're looking at stakeholders as a part of the process. The stakeholders are really going to be, I think we talked about this during the kind of the involvement, how the public and the community gets involved. One of the pieces to that public input process is stakeholders, and identifying what those stakeholders are.
right.
So that's where we're at right now.
I would think all of us would want to attend and listen to what all the stakeholders have to say.
Well, the stakeholder meetings are one-on-one meetings, or in groups of 2, or at the most 3, depending on how that ends up.
How do you identify the when you say 1 or 2 or 3, is that persons?
Persons, correct?
And so how do we decide who speaks for, say, the business community? Or
So
is that
that's-
Scott?
There are guiding principles, I guess you could say, that are being employed to identify that.
Somebody from the Chamber of Commerce will speak for the business district?
Or business owners individually would come and speak generally about the different types of activities that are important for that specific group.
And you, by lottery, you'll pick one minister to talk about all the churches in town, or?
That's the difficult task.
I'm just curious
That's-
about the process.
Yes, so that's the difficult task that's being identified, is how do you identify, and understand that this isn't the only mode of public input. It's just one of the pieces that they're using in gathering information.
Do they weigh it as more of a priority than others?
I would say no. I don't think it's the priority is even keel, meaning each of the public outreach components holds the same merit.
But there would be some public outreach components that would involve self-selected large groups of people over at Sarzati Park or something?
Yeah, so that would be the pop-up meetings that you're mentioning, I would say.
Okay,
Where if it's, while we'll have public opportunities for these types of meetings, like I was saying before, some of these pop-up meetings would be, the intentions for those would be like if there's soccer or baseball or softball or some sort of
Oh.
activity that's taking place, or Earth Day.
Man on the
That was
street
the other one
kind
that
of
was brought up
things,
as
yeah.
well, where you're going to that populated group and then looking for that feedback for that specific component. Not everybody's gonna be able to attend meetings, so sometimes you gotta go to
I
the
just
people.
want to make sure that however we select the population of stakeholder meetings, that we don't leave out any important people. And I got a little concerned when you said 1 or 2 people.
So that's in groups, 1 or 2 people in groups, up to 3 in groups, and there's going to be a number of groups. The number hasn't
Still
been,
talking about one or two people that represent business, one or two people, or do we say one or two people that represent restaurants? One or two people that represent churches?
potentially. Yeah, that's kind of
That's gonna
the,
be a tough way to figure out who gets to do that and who
it's,
gets left
it's,
out.
it's proving to be a difficult task. We've been wrestling with it. So,
Okay.
anyway, that's the update that's going on right now.
So,
Your goodwill is appreciated, thank you.
yeah. So what's the kickoff? Is the kickoff meeting open to the public, open to the commissioners?
Not this one. Not this one. We're meeting
Not
with,
even open to commissioners?
unfortunately
So
not.
who's
We are literally just meeting
Oh, is it
with,
just
with
for
the
staff?
team. Right.
Okay.
And then identifying
The plan, the process,
Okay.
identifying the process, identifying the timeline, identifying the,
fine,
right.
great, sure. All right,
So there is another item actually that,
yes, the Condor.
so that one is being continued, and I'm not identifying it as date specific because we have literally continued it, date specific every single time except for this. And the reason why is we're working with them closely currently. And I want to make sure that before we bring this back, that we don't do it date specific and put an earmarked date, that we make sure that this item is ready for this commission to review. So we were optimistic about being date specific before, assuming that we could get some solutions. But we want to make sure we're taking our time and getting all the questions answered.
And
So.
this is which project?
This
Condor
is-
Storage, it's 318,
Condor
Bryant.
storage, yeah.
Condor Storage wants to use a 2-acre parcel in the back part of their property for outside storage. It's a 2-acre parcel that is at the very rear, and it abuts the Whispering Oaks property,
So
which
does-
is county-owned
So does that,
senior housing.
does that
Correct.
does that mean like
Like,
an
like
RV?
boat
or-
trailers, RVs,
Like they already have in there, but they
Okay.
want to expand it.
Really, it's an expansion, right?
yeah, okay.
They
Um,
already have quite a few.
The fly in the ointment is that parcel, by parcel number, is currently listed in the general plan under the SPL, the Affordable Housing.
Yeah, it's within the
Overlay.
housing element. That's
And-
the issue.
And I think it's fair to say, without giving anything away, that the request to do that with something that's set for affordable housing is not that simple. It's not just that request.
Right.
And I
There's
have
more
had
to
a
it.
lot of pressure from citizens to say, I sure hope you'll turn that down. And all I can say is, we'll look at it when it comes to the planning commission. But you should know, it's not that simple. It's not that they're just simply saying, let us take this property that was set aside potentially for affordable housing and do something else with it.
Right.
And
We are
when it
looking at.
comes back to the commission, we'll see the entire proposal and we can decide if that's a good thing.
Right.
Or they can spend a lot of money and do it all underground, the storage, and then put
Whoa.
housing on top.
And then put senior housing on top of
They've done it
a
in other places.
multi-level
They've done-
underground
they've-
parking garage.
They've done it in other places.
I would say you've probably seen that in the heavily urbanized format.
Yes. I don't, yeah, that would surprise me.
Store all the RVs underground, housing on
Uh-huh.
Be nice.
best.
All the boat trailers with the big masts out there for trolling and,
Build a lake out there. Rent a boat.
anyway, so
Anyway,
that
so
will
that-
come back at some point when it's ready,
When it is ready, it will be coming back to this commission, yes.
okay? We only, Sustainable and Resilience Program, did you have anything to add tonight, Ray?
It's kind of shifted over to the Green Coalition and what we're doing with that and Earth Day and the reformation of the Green Coalition.
Oh,
So I mean, our committee still stands, but some of the, Kathy Nolan and I, who are the Sustainability Committee of the Planning Commission, we're also now on the board of the Green Coalition. So some of the focus is merging, and then some of it isn't, and
You said the reformation of the Green
that might have been
Coalition.
the wrong word, the rejuvenation, the renewal of. So, because the Green Coalition sent out a public email looking for new leadership. Some of us came forward to join the board. So we've joined the board of the Green Coalition to revitalize their mission and vision.
See, do you anticipate that they're gonna ask for more money from the city than they already have?
We don't know. This literally just happened a month ago.
Okay.
So our focus now is the Earth Day, because there was already money given by the city to produce Earth Day. So that was a deliverable
I
that
see.
needs to be
Okay.
delivered on. So that's April 18th. So the focus is going there so we can make good on that promise. And then after that, we'll look at what's next.
And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to Earth Day this year because it is the 50th anniversary,
50th is
correct?
gonna be very different than previous years. We're retooling the whole model of what it's gonna look like.
Great.
So,
Still gonna
Great.
be in Libby Park,
Still
but it's
gonna be
gonna
in
be
Libby
different.
Park, April 18th.
April 18th.
11
Okay.
to 4. So I'll
Okay.
make more
Great.
announcements as we get closer.
Yeah.
Okay, great. As far as the report on the Complete Streets Committee, I was not able to make it to the meeting today, and as we learned earlier, Commissioner Nolan reported in sick.
Right.
So I can't say for sure if there was a meeting.
I think, Kathy mentioned to me Souza was gonna be her proxy and
Okay.
go.
Yeah,
So I think it did happen.
we don't have a city council liaison either, so. Unless somebody wants to talk about something else, I think we're done. Adjourned at